With the recent release of The Strength of the Few, I thought now would be the perfect time to make an in-depth summary for The Will of the Many by James Islington. And yes, it is Islington, not Islington, like the borough in London. I had to fact check this because as amazing as the audiobook is for The Will of the Many, the narrator does pronounce the author's name wrong.
It's James Islington.
So if you've been saying it wrong, it's not really a big issue, but now you know. If you're not familiar with my in-depth summaries, these are not meant to be quick recaps. I am going chapter by chapter, summarizing the events of the book in detail, so that you basically feel like you've reread the book without having to spend the 30 hours it would take to do so to refresh your memory before moving on to book 2. And if you enjoy these summaries, consider joining my Patreon or becoming a channel member or sending a tip on Ko-fi so I can continue making them. I always make sure to turn down sponsors for these big summaries because I want you guys to be able to jump into this without any sponsor. Before getting into it, I do have a couple notes. The Will of the Many is a series that doesn't have much fan art, and I usually use a lot of fan art in these summaries. So I have tried my best. I have spent hours and hours collecting art that's Roman-esque, that reminds me of The Will of the Many, as well as like stock footage and stuff. So even if it's not quite lore accurate, I hope you guys will appreciate the effort that's gone into making this. I'm also gonna be pronouncing these Latin-inspired names according to the audiobook and the glossary at the back of the book, which if you haven't checked out either of those, you're probably gonna be confused hearing some of these pronunciations. So I'm trying my best to make them accurate. That being said, I might mess up here and there, but I'm trying my best. Now, without further ado, let's summarize The Will of the Many by James Islington. Starting with Part 1, Imperium Sine Fine, covering chapters 1 to 24. Now, the title of Part 1 is Latin, meaning Empire Without End, which you may recognize. It was famously used by the Roman poet Virgil in his epic poem, the Aeneid. In line 262, the god Jupiter prophesied that the city of Rome will found an everlasting empire, and this phrase perfectly captures the Catenan Republic and its ethos of colonialist expansionism and social structures of control. The book then opens with a memory. A young 14-year-old Vis hangs over a ledge, held only by his father's blood-soaked grip. "Courage," the man whispers, then lets go. This brief opening demonstrates many of the themes we're going to see throughout the book, those of sacrifice, control, and the fading grip of identity under an oppressive system. We then cut to the present, where Vis, now 17 years old, works in a deep prison beneath Latens. He plays a strategic game called Foundation with his superior, Rolf, an aging Septimus whose mind is beginning to falter. And this is the unintended side effect of being in near proximity to the sappers, and the reason why the prison staff have a frequent turnover. Vis wins easily and mentions how his father once trained him for this in a life long buried. Their routine is interrupted by a surprise visitor, Sextus Hospius, a high-ranking governance official with papers to prove it, demanding access to a prisoner named Natio. Something about Hospius feels off, but the documents are genuine. When Rolf stumbles, Vis jumps in to escort Hospius into the deep cells, where prisoners are strapped to ancient sappers. Now, a sapper is a pre-cataclysm machine that drains will and feeds it to the Catenan elite. The prisoners waste away in a near-death stasis, unable to move, but still faintly aware. It's a horrifying system, and Hospius is visibly shaken by it. They reach cell cell 41 where Natio lies bound. Viz winches him off the slab, breaking the sapper's hold, and as Natio awakens, Hospius speaks to him in Vetusian, a long-dead language banned by the hierarchy. A language that Vis is not meant to understand, but despite understanding them clearly, he feigns ignorance. He was raised to be a scholar, fluent in multiple tongues, back before he went into hiding. He picks up some odd words within their conversation like obitium, lucium, and seror, and mention of a gate, some kind of power from before the cataclysm. Hospius seems to believe that Natio is innocent. Now suddenly, the prisoner lashes out, grabbing Hospius, and Vis intervenes, but in the struggle, his hands touch the sapper. Now this should instantly drain his life and energy, but nothing happens. Hospius, either unaware or pretending to be, gives Vis a silver coin along with a warning to stay quiet about what happened. Later, Vis, shaken, reflects that he never underwent the Aurora Columnae ritual, the ritual pillar where teenagers go to enable the seeding of their will. He has never ceded will to the hierarchy, and that, he suspects, has made him immune. Most go through this ritual at the age of 12, with it being mandated at age 18, but Vis intends on doing everything he can to avoid ceding his will. Meanwhile, Hospius lingers in the guard room and chats with Rolf, who unknowingly praises Vis too much, mentioning his intelligence and his skill, and Hospius notes that Vis may be wasted in the prison and hints at finding him a more promising position. Now Vis is listening unseen, and he's terrified. Attention from powerful men is dangerous. In Chapter 2, we learn that Vis lives in an orphanage in Latens, working at the prison during the day and fighting in an underground fighting ring at night. Through exposition, we learn that Vis was once crown prince of the island Seuss, where he had an extensive education and even learned sword fighting. He had a loving family, father, mother, and 2 sisters, but after Seuss was invaded and subsequently captured by the Katenin Republic, his entire family was killed while he managed to flee, and he's now kept his identity a secret and has fabricated a past. Now, the owner of the fighting ring tells him that she's arranged a special match for him tonight, and by the smug looks from the other fighters, it's clear that Vis has been set up. It's revealed that he'll be fighting a Sextus. Now, as a brief reminder, Katenin hierarchy is built on ranks from octavi or 8th to princeps first, corresponding to how much will they receive from others. The princeps receives will from 40,320 people. Each rank offers increased levels of physical strength, mental skill, and the ability to use will as magic. Vis, who refuses to either receive or cede will, is drastically outmatched against a Sextus who receives will from 56 people. One wrong hit could cave in his skull, and he's stunned. He believes all of this is a plan because he's been winning too many fights, but he knows that he can't back out. He haggles, triple pay or no fight, and eventually they come to an agreement. But before the match, Vis meets Goffred, a balding Octavius who runs bets unofficially. Vis also notes a mysterious cloaked young woman who's attended all of his recent fights. He bets on himself surviving longer than 1 minute but less than 1.5, and Goffred reluctantly agrees. He then strips off all of his clothes, absolutely naked, and covers himself in grease.
Huh?
I know it seems like this is going in a weird direction, but trust me, he's doing this to avoid being manipulated via will-imbued clothing. And when he steps on stage, to the surprise and shock of the crowd laughing and cheers at his bold entrance, here we learn that he has deep, old, layered scars across his back. Despite the mismatch in power, Vis is smarter and faster, and he's fueled by rage.
Chain your anger in the dark, my mother used to tell me,
and it will only thrive. Now he attacks in a frenzy, and he's eventually able to knock the Sextus unconscious, and the crowd is absolutely shocked. He should not be able to do that. As Vis's rage clears, he's being dragged away by the owner. In the next chapter, he awakes, sore and exhausted, and shocked by his loss of control, and the owner of the arena tells him that he must have cheated. That's the only way he could have beaten a Sextus. She bans him from ever fighting again and takes away the money that he earned. He's then made aware that there's a potential adoption happening back at his orphanage, and it's not a regular visit. It's from a Quintus, one of the highest Catenin ranks, and naturally Vis is suspicious. When he peeks in on the adoption, Vis freezes. The visitor is Sextus Hospius, the man from the prison, only now he introduces himself properly as Quintus Ulciscor Telemus, a high-ranking Catenin agent. Now, Vis panics. He could run now and be hunted, or he could stay and risk exposure. He decides to wait it out, and Matron Atrox, the woman who regularly whips him for his refusal to cede, warns him not to ruin this for her. She's still convinced the Quintus is here for someone else. Now, she delivers Vis to the library, where Ulciscor happens to be waiting. He apologizes to Vis for the deception of giving a fake name the other day, claiming it was fully sanctioned by military. Ulciscor immediately tests him, asking Vis to cede will, and this is always the first step in an adoption interview, and it's always where Vis walks away. And of course, he refuses. What follows is this layered interrogation filled with power dynamics, subtext, and tactical lies. Vis invents a cover story about sneaking into the biblioteca at night to see a girl, but Ulciscor isn't really buying it. In fact, he traps Vis by suddenly issuing a threat in Vetusian, that dead language that he's not supposed to know, and Vis, hearing a death threat, naturally freezes up. And it's that reaction that gives him away. Ulciscor reveals that he believes his resistance to the Sapper may be linked to his refusal to go through the Aurora Columnae. He presses Vis to cede just for a moment in exchange for freedom, a guaranteed Sextus level position, wealth, and influence, but Vis doesn't budge. This is the line that he will not cross. To him, the man who burned Zeus, his people, his family, stands on the other side of that line. And surprisingly, Ulciscor is pleased. He now believes that Vis's resistance to the Sapper wasn't a coincidence, and he wants to study this, but he needs someone like Vis, intelligent, willful, and unseated. And what follows is an extended test of Vis's intellect. Ulciscor quizzes him for hours on topics ranging from the structure of the hierarchy to the economics and ethics of will, the cataclysm, and the mathematical systems behind how will is distributed. And Vis ends up surprising him one final time by deducing that the coin that was given to him earlier was imbued with will, allowing Ulciscor to track him, despite coins being notoriously resistant to infusion. Ulciscor nods that he's correct, and he says it's time to tell the matron the good news. He announces in front of the entire orphanage that he's adopting Vis, and they all stare in disbelief. A bully orphan named Vermez laughs out loud until Ulciscor calmly tears him down. You're a deeply unpleasant child, immature, spiteful, and honestly, not very bright. So it doesn't matter how strong your will is, nobody wants to have someone like you living with them. Everyone gets the message. Ulciscor is not to be questioned. Now, Matron Atrox, visibly shaken after speaking with Ulciscor, returns the stolen wages she took from Vis. Whatever he said clearly rattled her, and as Vis leaves, he whispers, "I'm going to come back one day." A promise that terrifies her. Now outside, they walk through Latens as Ulciscor finally explains they're headed to Dedicia, Not only that, but they'll be traveling by Transvect, a massive will-powered vessel capable of traversing thousands of miles in a day, and Vis is stunned by its size, even more by the fact that it hovers, and these were once the subject of propaganda. Now he's stepping inside one. On board, Ulquiskor gives Vis his new identity, Vis Telemus, officially adopted. They have the entire Transvect to themselves as Ulquiskor begins another test. How much will do you think it takes to move this thing? Vis believes with strategic use of harmonic and reactive imbuing, it could be run by a single Totius Quintus, which Ulquiskor confirms. The Transvect lifts into the sky, and Vis finally learns the full truth. He's being sent to the Katenin Academy. The Academy is the only place in the Republic where seeding will, or receiving it, is forbidden. The hierarchy's most prestigious institution, a training ground for future senators and leaders. If Vis performs well, he could earn a position as a Totius and never have to seed will at all. Ulquiskor frames it as a gift, an opportunity, but Vis reads between the lines. He needs a spy. Ulquiskor believes something is deeply wrong at the Academy, which is run by religion's pyramid, specifically Quintus Viridius Iulii, a former military candidate who inexplicably defected to religion after winning the Academy's final trial, the Eutychium, during which 2 students died. Since becoming Principalis, Viridius has centralized power, moved the school to a remote island called Solivagus, and subtly blacklisted his former classmates, people like Natio, the prisoner from earlier. Ulquiskor suspects they're searching for something, maybe a pre-cataclysm weapon, and if they find it, the power balance in the Senate could shift dangerously. But here's the deal, if Vis finds proof, he gets his freedom. If not, Ulquiskor could have him sent to a sapper. It's blackmail dressed as opportunity. Ulquiskor chooses him because most Academy students have already seeded will, and Viridius seems to prefer those who haven't. That makes Vis rare. Now the tension breaks when the Transvects, the section in front of them, suddenly explodes. Ulquiskor, calm and composed, even as fire hurtles towards them, rips open a floor hatch and orders Vis to jump when the vessel hits the trees. And they crash hard. Ulquiskor survives, though wounded, having taken the brunt of the fall. The explosion was caused by a will shell, a banned tech from the old wars, likely planted in the grain by a rebel group called the Anguis, a group known for their brutal resistance to the Katenin Republic. When they get to the crash site, they find 4 men scavenging the wreck, one of which lies and tries to say they're doing maintenance. A heartbeat later, the liar's head explodes. The other men panic, ducking behind debris, and Ulquiskor's voice is ice as he says, "He lied to me, and I'm not in a good mood." But then an arrow strikes Ulquiskor in the leg, and impossibly, he collapses. And this shouldn't be possible. A Quintus shouldn't fall to a single shot. Even the rebels hesitate, but one of them draws a knife, and Vis manages to fight off 3 attackers. He shares their hatred for the Republic, but he finds their tactics abhorrent. Despite being injured, he manages to defeat them, but a 4th figure appears, a woman with a bow named Sedocia, who shockingly calls him by the name Diego, revealing that she knows his true identity as the last surviving prince of Seuss. Sedocia explains the attack was orchestrated specifically to capture him. She claims the Anguis want him at the Academy, just like Ulquiskor does, but for their own ends. Unlike Ulquiskor, they want him to eventually rise through the ranks and become Domitor, a powerful leader they can use to strike back at the Republic from within. She insists he's not ready and offers him a month of training with them before he starts at the Academy, but Vis refuses, messages stating that he's chosen a path that might grant him some semblance of a normal life, even if it means working within the system. But unwilling to let him go easily, Sedocia issues a threat: attend the Yovan festival in Katen in 1 month, or she'll tell the world who he is. She disappears into the forest, and bleeding and fading fast, Vis drags Alkiskor back into the Transvect, manages to reactivate it by trial and error, and passes out as the vessel lurches back into motion. Now when Vis awakens, he hears the sound of crashing waves, and he thinks he's home in Seuss, until he opens his eyes and he's in the infirmary of the academy. 2 curious students have snuck in to investigate: Amisa, a clever and chatty girl with bright green eyes, and Indol, her scowling companion. And they try to prod for answers, but Vis deflects their questions, giving only the basics. He agrees to say they were never there, and when they leave, the physician finally arrives, a friendly, relaxed man who Vis quickly realizes is actually probing for information about the attack, including how the Quintus was wounded, and whether Vis removed the arrow himself. Now, Vis manages to lie smoothly, but just as the questions start to corner him, Alkiskor enters, clean and composed, and he greets the physician with unexpected familiarity. And this is when Vis realizes the healer is actually the Principalis of the Academy, Viridius, which makes Vis even more confused that Alkiskor is greeting him like he's an old friend. As they leave the academy, Alkiskor quickly drops his veneer of composure. They pass through a will cage, which is basically a heavily fortified tunnel that cuts off all external will from entering. It also kind of acts as like a symbolic barrier that defines the separation between the academy and the world outside. Once beyond the wall, they can speak freely again, and Vis recounts his version of the ambush in the forest, but strategically omits the Anguis involvement and Lady Sedocia. Now, Alkiskor accepts the lie, but he's clearly disturbed by the mysterious arrow that brought him down. And as they wait for a Transvect to arrive, Alkiskor confides the truth that his younger brother, Siror, was the one who died during the Ludiceum. Which, remember, the Ludiceum is the Academy's final trial between the top 6 students. He believes that his brother was killed to protect whatever secret religion is hiding in the ruins on this island. And so he gives Vis the mission of investigating these 2 ruins. Now, Vis then brings up the man that Alkiskor killed during the attack. The law of birthright is supposed to protect every human life, yet Alkiskor broke it without hesitation. And when Vis asks if it was justified and if he would do it again, his father replies that he would. And this leaves Vis kind of disturbed, and then neither of them speak as they wait for the next Transvect. Now, the next chapter, Vis finally lays eyes on Katen, the shining capital of Dedicia. But for all of its awe-inspiring grandeur and will-powered machines, Vis finds Katen to be overwhelming, even terrifying, as it reminds him of the size, wealth, and power of his enemy. How can he undo something so colossal? Yet Vis, ever the survivor, plays his part. He feigns curiosity, and he plants a seed of interest for the Festival of Yovan and the upcoming Naumachia, a staged naval battle that he now realizes he must attend to deal with Sedocia's threat. Now, they travel through the city out to the farmlands where Alkiskor's family estate lies. Vis is told that he'll spend 2 months at Villa Telemus, receiving elite tutoring before entering the academy. And Alkiskor tells him to obey his tutor, Lanastia, a powerful sextus who speaks with his authority. Now, they arrive at Villa Telemus in the rolling farmlands of Sarkinia, a land of orchards and gleaming will-powered machines harvesting crops, and this is where we meet Lannistia, a sharp, no-nonsense woman wearing dark, will-forged glasses, and she's clearly annoyed by Vis's unexpected arrival, but she softens a little bit when she hears that he saved Ulquiscor's life. Now, she's younger than expected, maybe only 5 or 6 years older than Vis, but she carries herself with authority. Right away, she makes it clear that she disapproves of the secrecy that Ulquiscor used, and that he didn't even tell his politically powerful wife, Relukia. And yes, this is where Vis learns that he now has a legal mother. He thought Ulquiscor would have mentioned something like that. However, apparently she's abroad right now and might not return until after he graduates the academy. Now, Vis is also introduced to the villa's steward named Cadmos, a man who treats Vis with measured hospitality, but also a hint of suspicion. And when Cadmos disables the room's security tile in front of Vis, it's kind of a way to let him know that he's being watched. And later on, unable to trust his own room, Vis sneaks out through the window, but he ends up falling. He kind of botches the landing, but he doesn't injure anything but his pride. He snoops around and he ends up spying on a conversation between Ulquiscor and Lannistia, overhearing details about a string of Anguis assassinations and suspicions that Melior, the infamous rebel leader himself, might be behind the attack on the Transvect. And he also lets slip that he's using Vis as both a tool and a test, because if he happens to die at the Academy, the Senate will be forced to act. Not really something you want to hear coming from your new stepfather. Now, they also mention something mysterious, that the correctors are conducting secret blood tests trying to detect some kind of infection, and we don't really know what this means yet, and neither does Vis. Vis ends up being caught by Cadmos shortly after, and this makes it very clear that his movements are being tracked, possibly even through some mechanism on his body. Shaken by all of this, Vis returns to his room, realizing just how deep into a game of politics and power he's already fallen. Lannistia wakes him before dawn to relentlessly and brutally quiz him. She bombards him with rapid-fire prompts from Katenan history, legal structures, and theory of willcraft, and she ends up delivering the verdict that Ulquiscor overestimated him. He's not remotely ready for the Academy, and she's not sure she can get him there in 2 months. She then drops 3 dense tomes onto his lap and tells him to read these, all of them, by tomorrow. He then spends the rest of the day relentlessly reading, which I know, sounds terrible, right? Cadmos begins giving him this daily pain-numbing tea that will still allow him to train, but not without side effects. By the end of the night, he collapses into bed, only to be yanked awake moments later by the unmistakable sense that someone has entered the room. And he's right. Lannistia attacks him in the dark without warning and without mercy. She slams him to the floor, straddles him, hand around his throat, demanding answers to academic questions. Every wrong answer brings renewed pressure. She even slaps him hard enough to leave his head spinning. Eventually, he realizes this isn't just her version of a dominance kink, but she's actually testing him, not about the knowledge of the books that he read alone, but of composure, of recall under stress. But maybe she does have a thing for dominance too. Who really knows? He ends up passing the test and she lets go, but he demands to know what she's trying to prove. It's a goddamn school. There's nothing more they can do to me. And this is when Lannistia removes her glasses. Her eyes are gone. They're just white, scarred sockets. The Academy took them. There is always something more to lose, Vis, she says, and then leaves him in silence to think about how this is not a game. The next day, over lunch, Lannistia offers him a rare compliment, saying that he has good instincts in a fight. Vis then questions how she's able to see without eyes, and Lannistia explains that she's able to use will to imbue the air around her 200 times per second. And this absolutely stuns Vis, just the sheer concentration that this would require, and the casual way that she treats it. It's another reminder of the gulf between them. They then begin training, and Vis is matched against a man named Conlis, who's a massive Octavius built like a bear. He takes a brutal hit, but then recovers and eventually adapts to the fight and ends up winning the match. But Lannistia isn't impressed. She says he won with a minimum of strategy and technique, and that the Academy is going to expect more than brawling. Manipulating will at higher levels requires precise physical control, speed, endurance, and discipline. He tries to argue, saying he's not that far behind, and Lannistia shrugs off her cloak and says, "Let's find out," offering him a challenge that if he can touch her, he wins. She uses no more will than Conlis did. Everything is going to her vision. She then snaps off a twig to use as her only weapon, and as Vis charges, he never even comes close. Lannistia strikes with swift, surgical precision, slashing his cheek again and again with the twig. He can't even react fast enough to defend himself. She moves with uncanny speed and perfect control. And eventually, the pain builds up, so does his frustration, and in desperation, he throws a rock to distract her, then rushes in, only to be slammed down and held in a painful lock. Eventually, he concedes the duel and recognizes that he needs her to train him. Chapter 15, she leads him through a series of will-locked doors beneath the villa into a massive chamber dominated by a sprawling underground maze. And this is a near exact replica of the labyrinth used at the Academy to test the students' ability to wield will under pressure. Ulquiskor and Lannistia broke multiple laws to build this in secret, and no one else in the household knows that it exists. The labyrinth is controlled by a bracer embedded with dozens of onyx stones, each one keyed to specific wall panels, and a skillful user can manipulate the maze in real time, shifting the walls to open new paths or block others. And mastery of the labyrinth is essential for advancement in the Academy. Lannistia demonstrates how the bracer works and shows how any incorrect movement risks shattering the stones. And Vis naturally ignores her and tries it, and the control stone explodes, slicing his finger open. After patching him up and, yes, giving him stitches, she explains more about her will-based vision and how she can focus with perfect clarity on a small detail, even the stitches in his hand, but everything else around her becomes a stuttering blur. After replacing a stone in the bracer, they get to practicing, and Vis repeatedly fails. He grinds the stones by not using enough pressure, he misaligns panels, he drops more stones, but eventually he improves enough that Lannistia tells him he's no prodigy, but he's not hopeless either. In the next chapter, 2 weeks pass by, and Vis is utterly exhausted, and is constantly bruised from the training. He even gets lectured by Cadmos on political theory and metaphysical systems, and by midday, Lannistia returns to lecture him on the web of the Senate. 459 senators, many with families whose children will soon be his classmates. It's an information overload, and he struggles to retain it all, but he tries his best. Afternoons are spent in the labyrinth, and progress is slow but steady, with Vis now failing only 1 in every 4 or 5 attempts. 16 days in, Cadmos directs him to the villa's bathhouse, and waiting for him there is Magnus Quartus Advenius Claudius, a powerful governance senator who's there for an off-the-record meeting. Claudius happened to be on his way to Caten and wanted a first-hand look at Ulquiscor's new heir. Vis plays his role, answering questions about his background, education, and the Transvect attack. Then Claudius makes his real move. He wants his daughter, Iqua, a Class 5 student, to train with Vis over the break. It's a political power play disguised as a favor, and refusal isn't really an option here. He also subtly undermines Ulquiscor, mentioning that Siror wasn't murdered, but that he killed himself, and this is a revelation that rattles Vis, and wants Vis's help investigating. Now, Vis denies seeing anything suspicious and keeps his cover intact. He asks if he can meet Iqua at the Festival of Yovan, framing it as a way to begin their friendship publicly. Claudius agrees and even offers to push Ulquiscor to allow it, giving Vis the perfect excuse to attend the Naumachia undetected. The next time Vis trains with Lannistia, she warns him that Iqua is clearly a spy and Claudius is lying about Siror ending his own life. She is adamant that he was killed by Viridius. Now, Lannistia then delivers critical news. Vis has an audience with the Senate scheduled right after the Festival of Yovan. Now, over the next 3 weeks, he trains relentlessly and hones his skills, with his bracer control in the labyrinth now nearly flawless. And on the day of the festival, Vis meets with Iqua, and she greets him with polite detachment, and she doesn't really have any interest in seeing the Naumachia. On the way there, Iqua quizzes Vis academically on various different things, and he plays the role of the modest, unremarkable heir in order to avoid suspicion and so that she underestimates him. And as they enter Katen, the city bursts with colors and music and celebration, and they end up talking about Siror. According to Iqua, the public version of the story is clear. 6 years ago, during the Eutychium at the Academy, Siror believed he had accidentally killed another student. Unwilling to face the sappers, he threw himself off a cliff. But the student actually survived, and Quintus Viridius, now Principalis, carried that student back, earning him heroic praise. However, Ulquiscor rejected the official version and accused Viridius publicly until his family silenced him. The feud still remains infamous. Now, Vis is very troubled at hearing this, because if the story is widespread and no one believes Ulquiscor, then his motivations in adopting Vis and sending him to the academy are now going to look very suspicious. Everyone at the academy will be watching, and Ulquiscor may not have military's backing at all if the whole mission is personal. If it's just vengeance for Siror, then Vis is walking into the lion's den with no real support. And if this is all a conspiracy and the public story is actually the truth, there's nothing to expose, and he'll be sent to the sappers. Now, when they arrive, Vis is overwhelmed by the grandeur and the horror of the Katenin Arena, a massive artificial lake filled with warships and condemned criminals forced to battle for sport. All of it held aloft and functional through massive will expenditure. The combatants wear conditionally imbued armor, but the weapons and the deaths are real, and the crowd cheers them on. Iqua explains the rules of the game coldly, and she claims the rule of birthright doesn't apply to criminals, and therefore she dismisses any moral concern. However, Vis is disgusted, and he excuses himself to go use the restroom, hoping that Sedocia will find him. And she does. Sedocia whisks him through secret stairwells and into the sewers, making him strip off anything Ulquiscor may have provided in order to avoid tracking, and replaces them with plain tunics. They wade through filth and stench until they reach a hidden chamber lit by a dying torch, and here Vis meets Melior and is stunned to discover that it's Estevan, a former trusted advisor to his father in Zeus and now the leader of the Anguis. Estevan urges Vis to rise through the academy and eventually take power through governance or religion, not military, in order to help the rebellion. But Vis refuses, recalling how the Anguis once raided a village that sheltered him after the fall of Zeus. He remembers their houses being burned down, innocents dead, and families destroyed. Estevan argues that neutrality is complicity, that even victims can still be enemies. Hating the system without fighting it only perpetuates its power. But still, Vis won't budge. Estevan hints that Zeus was destroyed not for power, but for what it knew, and he tells Vis that he'll learn the truth soon. Before parting, Sedocia cuts his chest with a stone stylus, collecting blood that hisses and steams on contact, and she calls it protection, but doesn't offer any further explanation. He hides the stylus in his toga, and he returns just in time for the Naumachia to begin. Iqua is irritated that he took so long, but she doesn't seem suspicious. Will-fueled warships crash in choreographed bloodshed, criminals die horribly, screaming into the water or torn to shreds, and the crowd cheers them on. Vis is disgusted. It's not a battle, it's a theater, a brutal circus meant to entertain. But then something shifts. Red froth spreads across the lake, jagged stones erupt from the water, and the will-powered vessels all fail. No one is able to use their will. And then a voice booms across the arena.
My name is Arteris Melior Leos. I am the leader of the group you know as the Anguis, who fight for a better world than the one you have created.
Estevan emerges, denouncing the Republic and its citizens for enabling tyranny.
A pyramid's strength is in its foundation, not its peak. So I have come here today to judge. I have come to bring a reckoning for your decisions, your weakness, your blindness and cowardice and complicity.
Dozens of the criminals in the arena abandon their fight and sprint toward Estevan, hoping to slay Melior and earn a pardon. Suddenly, an odd hum fills the air and they all vanish in a single instant, erased by some unknown force. Then, with a terrible ripple of air, a section of the arena explodes, reducing thousands to crimson mist. As the crowd erupts in panic, Vis remains focused. Another explosion hits. Calculating the pattern, he pulls Iqua toward a destroyed section, reasoning that it won't be struck again. They wade their way through the shredded remains of what used to be spectators. Nothing but steam, gore, and fragments of bone, and Iqua is silent but weeping, but she continues to follow him. He leads her to the stairs leading to the sewers, and they descend into the rising water, struggling through darkness toward the chamber where Vis met Estevan. He helps Iqua onto the dry steps that lead out, but then he stops, haunted by Estevan's words and his father's words. The power to protect is the highest of responsibilities. And here, Vis makes a choice. He turns back the way that he came. He believes that he may be the only one who can stop this, and the blood-bound stylus on his chest may be the key. He climbs back into the shattered arena where the aftermath of the Naumachia is a complete massacre. The air reeks of blood and salt, and at the center of it all sits Estevan, calm and waiting, cross-legged amid the carnage that he's wrought. As Vis gets close to him, the air grows thick and reality begins to distort, and when Vis lunges to strike the stylus into the man's throat, the world momentarily vanishes, and he glimpses a surreal vision, a black pyramid, lightning-filled skies, a harbor lined with enormous statues, and waves the size of mountains crashing down. Agony begins to tear through him, his blood boiling, body rending apart, and then suddenly he's back, gasping and shaking. Esteban welcomes him gently and speaks again of complicity.
Silence is a statement, Diago. Inaction picks a side, and when those lead to personal benefit, they are complicity.
The air around them thrums with deadly power, and Vis holds the stylus to Esteban's neck. He begs the man to stop the violence, offering his help in exchange, but Esteban doesn't believe him, though he says a broken blade can still cut. He then grabs Vis's hand and drives the stylus through his own throat, ending his life and halting the chaos. He yanks the stylus from Esteban's neck, throws his body into the lake, and flings the stylus away to avoid exposure. Then, collapsing, he hears the crowd cheering. And then the next time that Vis wakes, it's nearly a week later, and he's in Alquiscor's villa, now being hailed as a hero. Apparently, the attack killed tens of thousands and triggered massive failures across the city, buckling will pyramids. And because of his actions, the Senate has officially ratified his adoption, naming him Vis Telemus Catenicus. Alquiscor is very impressed, and he questions what happened, but Vis manages to lie smoothly. He claims that he found the sewer entrance, and he just happened to find this stylus on the ground, and he acted at the right moment. Alquiscor suspects that Vis resisted Esteban's powers because he never ceded will. Then Alquiscor finally opens up and explains what happened to his brother, Siror Telemus. Siror, Lannistia, and Viridius were close friends at the academy, and after a mysterious incident during the Eutychium where Lannistia was injured, Siror was overcome with guilt and reportedly jumped off a cliff, but Alquiscor never believed that story because of his brother's final message. They would often write to each other using a stylus keyed between them, and Siror's last message contained a cipher which, when decoded, reads:
Translation right. Obitium lost. Lucium unknown. Sintres exunis worked. Gate will open. More strange pre-cataclysm power. Only Viridius knows.
Alquiscor believes that his brother discovered something dangerous in the ruins near the academy, and that Viridius killed him to bury it. Lannistia survived, but she was left blind and amnesiac. Viridius fled to religion to avoid investigation. His version of events protected both himself and the academy from scrutiny, so no investigation followed. Alquiscor admits that he withheld this from Vis so as not to cloud his training, but now, with only 2 weeks left before the academy begins, he shares everything. The truth lies buried in the academy's ruins, and Viridius is the only person that knows what happened. Now in the next chapter, Vis and Lannistia spar on the rooftop, and she's clearly pulling her punches, but when called out, she admits she's been easing him back in after his week of unconsciousness. Eventually, they end up finding an understanding, and they get back to fighting like usual. Then a carriage arrives. Sextus Gaius Valerius steps out, claiming to be sent by the Senate for a medical examination, showing a blank tile as authorization. And this form of authorization is old and discreet, and suggests that even Alquiscor would be expected to comply without questioning. Almost like this guy is an FBI agent or something like that. Now, Gaius, his examination is very invasive. Hair, nails, saliva, and blood, all taken without explanation. He claims Melior's power must be studied to prevent another catastrophe. Vis cooperates, but he withholds anything that could reveal the stylus or his immunity to will, and despite a part of him wanting to help prevent another catastrophe, another part remembers that the value of this weapon, whatever weapon Estevan was using, the fact that the hierarchy doesn't have this is incredibly valuable. Now, before leaving, Gaius shows Vis 4 sketches, one depicting the Black Pyramid before crashing waves, exactly like the vision that Vis saw when attacking Estevan. He tries to hide his reaction, but Gaius notices and tells him to report any memories to Tertius Servius, or Servius, I'm not sure how you pronounce that one, for a reward. Now after this, Lannistia confronts Vis, asking why he returned to the arena instead of escaping. She knows he has no love for the Republic, and she's seen the whip scars on his back, and she says that self-sacrifice isn't really like him, and this angers Vis. He insists he did it because it was the right thing to do, and he snaps that maybe I'm a better person than you. Lannistia replies, maybe you are, but that's not necessarily what we need from you, Vis. It's a quality that won't serve you well in the academy. She then gets up and leaves Vis to think. In the next chapter, he resumes his studies with Cadmos, who's outraged when he hears about Gaius's physical exam. No physician needs blood and bone samples. Cadmos then opens up to Vis about his past. He reveals that he once led the Azriot Institute before being denounced during the purges that followed Eremitides' rebellion. He shows faded scars from rejecting the Aurora Columni, and he calls himself a survivor, not a rebel.
There comes a point in every man's life where he can rail against the unfairness of the world until he loses, or he can do his best in it, remain a victim, or become a survivor.
Now Vis listens, but he rejects that philosophy. He refuses to trade freedom for comfort. Then a letter arrives from Lady Relucia Telemis, Ulquiscor's wife, and the mother that Vis has yet to meet. Apparently, she plans to return to Caten soon. Now, following this, weeks pass in relentless training. The Anguist remain silent after their leader's death, and though Vis is growing stronger, his nights are filled with blood-drenched nightmares of the Naumachia. And when departure day arrives, Lannistia informs him of the plan. Ulquiscor has arranged for him to attend the Festival of the Ancestors at the Necropolis, and she confirms details about his future classmates, Indol, Belly, and Amisa, who are all scions of military families in Class 3, which makes them unlikely pawns for Viridius. And Lannistia says that his job is to get into Class 3. For once, her parting encouragement feels genuine, so Vis teases that she thinks he's good, and she promptly knocks him flat. As he leaves for the academy, he feels a surprising pang of loss. Villa Telemis was never really his home, but leaving it feels like closing the door on the only peace he's ever known. We then move on to part 2, which has the Latin title Deus Nolens Exitus, and this translates to Results God Unwilling, which means to get results done whether God likes it or not. And this kind of contrasts with the common Latin saying Deus Ex Machina, where divine intervention is what gets the result. And Deus Nolens Exitus is clearly referring to Vis's determination to get things done. Chapter 25. As the Transvect crosses the shimmering waters towards Solivagus, Vis reflects on his father's lesson.
Nervousness means there's a fear to be faced ahead, Diago. The man who is never nervous never does anything hard. The man who is never nervous never grows.
He clings to this mantra as he arrives alone at the academy. He's greeted by Septimus Ulnius Philo, the school physician, and this man surprises Vis by pledging his support and explaining that his sister was at the Naumachia and she survived thanks to Vis. Inside the campus, he's then brought to Principalis Viridius, who is disarmingly kind. He acknowledges Ulquiscor's grudge and admits that he assumes Vis is here to dig something up, but he insists that he holds no ill will, nor will he tolerate any subterfuge. He then gives him the option to start in a higher class, but Vis, ever careful, opts to start in class 7. And it is a clever choice. It lets him seem humble, hardworking, and rule-abiding, and Viridius seems pleased. In the 7th dormitory, they encounter Collidus Aresius, a nervous, bookish student who Viridius orders to escort Vis to dinner. Now, the tiered dining hall is a physical hierarchy. 7ths eat at the bottom tier, and the elite Class 3 students dine on luxurious couches up above. But trouble soon finds him when Aiden Brack, a towering Class 6, threatens Collidus. Aiden claims that Collidus's father has made mistakes and he intends to send a message. But then Vis steps in. He first offers peace, but when Amisa yells a warning and Aiden sucker punches Vis, he retaliates with an uppercut that shatters Aiden's nose and drops him to the floor. Sobered by just how hard he hit the guy, Vis drops to the floor to tend his injuries. Now Amisa seems amused, almost impressed, but then Praeceptor Nikias arrives. Nikias assumes that Vis attacked unprovoked despite Indol's defense, and he warns Vis reputation won't save you. The Praeceptor orders Vis to follow him to face the consequences of his very first academy fight. Now in the next chapter, he's joined by Praeceptor Tadia, a stern but fair instructor of Class 5 who warns him that expulsion is likely, but she advises showing humility to avoid it. And during the hearing, Nikias presents Iro Decimus, a Class 3 student who falsely claims that Vis attacked first. Viridius allows Vis to respond, and calmly, Vis tells the truth. He acted to defend Collidus. Viridius silences Nikias' interruptions, and eventually, Aiden, still bruised and bandaged, is brought in. Vis executes a deliberate and risky strategy, the threefold apology, a formal Katenin ritual of reconciliation. He apologizes directly, invokes his outsider ignorance, extends his hand, and most importantly, presses for Aiden to shake it. Now Aiden, confused and not native to Katenin customs, accepts the gesture without understanding the implications. The apology is now legally binding, and Viridius rules that Aiden has forfeited any claim to pursue expulsion. But still, Viridius assigns Vis penance, 2 months of mucking out the horse stables during dinner, ensuring that he has social isolation. When Vis returns to his dorms, everyone is stunned that he didn't get expelled. Collidus, however, is bitter. He's now visibly bruised. He's been beaten up. Somebody else came to deliver the second message. And he explains that he didn't think that Vis's actions were noble. He just thought he was trying to make an impression. Vis tries to apologize, but Collidus just turns back to his book without replying. Later, a smug 7th mocks Collidus and tries to get Vis to join in, and he reveals that Collidus failed Class 3, and that his father is Magnus Aresius, the Censor of Governance, one of the highest ranking men in the hierarchy. And Vis, being the badass he is, replies, "From what I can tell, the only difference between you and him is that his father is more successful than yours." And then when asked why he thinks he's better than them, Vis simply replies, "Because I killed him," referring to him stopping the leader of the Anguis at the Naumachia. He's now confirming what a lot of students thought was just a rumor. So on his first night, he got into a fight, he has drawn a lot of attention, and alienated potential allies. The next day, Vis wakes early to see that Calidus is already awake and studying. He heads outside where he runs into Equa, and she admits that she's been having nightmares about the Naumachia, and she suspects that Vis knew more than he let on, and she questions how he remained calm. Vis carefully crafts a plausible explanation, framing his actions as survival instinct born of trauma. She seems to accept this, but as they part ways, she says they should keep their distance due to their class differences. At breakfast, Vis is shunned by the other 7ths, while Iroh and the Preceptors openly monitor him from their higher tiers. And then, in his first class, he shows off his advanced knowledge to gain Preceptor Faria's attention, which works. He quickly realizes that the 7th level curriculum is shockingly basic. Faria ends up tailoring a harder exam just for him. Now, Calidus warns that he'll be promoted if he keeps this up, and Vis admits that that's the plan. Calidus simply replies, "If that's what you want," and returns to his own studies. Later, at lunch, Calidus actually joins Vis, and the two begin to reach a tentative truce. Calidus admits that he may have overreacted the night before, and he points out that Viridius likely paired Vis with him intentionally, not as a kindness, but as a calculated move. Calidus's father recently vetoed several major Senate proposals, making the Euresius name unpopular. Vis now realizes he was dropped into an active political minefield, and his altercation with Iden may have been expected. The two boys then discuss will theory, and Vis is surprised at how advanced Calidus's understanding is. When asked if he belongs in Class 7, Calidus shrugs and says, "I could probably be higher." Their friendship slowly begins to solidify. Now Vis is sent to begin his punishment shift in the stables, and as he walks, he takes note of the Transvect shuttle route, believing he might be able to use this during the Festival of the Ancestors as some sort of cover for accessing the ruins on the island. While cleaning the stable, Amisa shows up claiming she's here for penance, and she warns him that rumors are spreading, likely from Iroh, that Vis's rise is politically staged. Despite this, she praises him for standing up to Iden and explains the real challenge ahead. Advancement to higher classes is controlled by Dualtatis, an ally of Nakius who dislikes outsiders like Vis. He's going to have to exceed expectations to be noticed. And as they finish, Amisa reveals that her penance was self-imposed. She simply felt guilty for not doing more the day before, and Vis finds himself smiling. Now when he returns to report to Faria, she tells him to pack his things because he's moving up to Class 6 immediately and will begin reporting to none other than Preceptor Dualtatis. In the next chapter, Vis wakes in his new Class 6 dormitory to the rhythmic stab 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 of Iden furiously carving into a wax tablet like it insulted his mother. The tattoos covering Iden's chest are as intricate as his mood is sour, and despite the tension, Vis is in decent spirits. He's moving up fast, and feeling optimistic, he goes to sit with his new class at breakfast, and he's met with the social equivalent of a brick wall. One of the girls even asks him to leave, and a few students shoot glances over towards Iroh, who sits smugly at the Class 3 table. Vis realizes that Class 6 students aren't rejecting him because they hate him, they're afraid of who might be watching. He then picks up his tray and heads back to Calidus, who rises a mug and welcomes him back, giving a toast to the pariah table.
If everyone in Class 6 is going to try and ignore me, then I'll just have to make them pay attention.
Now 6 weeks pass in a grind of study, drills, and subtle sabotage. Dualtatis goes out of his way to humiliate Vis, ignoring his answers, cutting off his remarks, ensuring no one forgets who's bottom ranked. The rest of Class 6 follows suit, though Calidus remains a steady friend, and Amisa's occasional visits in the stable help him stay sane. Then, midway through the second month, Dualtatis announces they're going to run the labyrinth over the course of 2 days. It's a chance to prove his worth, and Vis knows it. And to make things more interesting, Principalis Viridius himself shows up to watch, which clearly infuriates Dualtatis. Pairs are assigned. One student runs, pursued by other students acting as hunters, while their partner controls the maze from above using a will-linked bracer. Now everyone but Vis and Aiden find a partner, forcing the two least compatible people on the island to work together. The first student's run is an absolute disaster, and they're captured quickly. They then switch roles, and they fail again. Then Dualtatis calls up our lowest ranked student. Vis swallows the insult and steps forward. Despite no shared code and complete silence from Aiden, Vis adapts and relies on instinct. And to his surprise, Aiden's control is quiet and precise. And together they last longer than anyone expects, nearly 2/3 through the maze before being trapped between two hunters. It's not exactly a win, but it's enough to make people notice. Now Vis and Aiden trade places, and Vis hears Aiden mutter a phrase in Chimerian, a phrase that means better than competent, and the words catch Vis off guard. Chimerian is a dead language, one that his mother once spoke, and it confirms a suspicion that Aiden isn't just a southerner, he's Chimere-born. Now controlling the bracer, the run begins, and Aiden charges ahead with no coordination, clearly expecting no help. And irritated, Vis starts adjusting the panels anyway, fumbling at first, but then finding that rhythm, and begins calculating the hunters' moves before they make them. When hunters close in and Aiden doesn't react, Vis shouts directions in Chimerian, and suddenly Aiden follows perfectly. Their coordination so seamless that the crowd falls into stunned silence, and when Aiden makes it to the final corridor, the class erupts in astonished murmurs. He punches the air in triumph, and Vis laughs, adrenaline running through him. They're the only pair to make it to the end. However, their victory is short-lived. Dualtatis declares the run invalid. Communication in a foreign language is apparently against the rules. Aiden argues that Chimerian was their code, not a forbidden language, but the Praeceptor doubles down, and Viridius's faint nod of approval is the only consolation. Viridius walks over and explains to him that Dualtatis's contempt stems from old wounds. He lost career advancement after the death of Siror Telemus, and he blames the Telemus name. Before leaving, he also casually mentions that the labyrinth is left unlocked in the early mornings. Vis understands the offer, train in secret, and get better. But another idea takes root. If he can't advance with Dualtatis' rules, then he'll break them. Tonight, he'll scale the academy wall and explore the ruins himself to find something that might prove his worth to Ulquiskor and force the world to take notice. Now, over breakfast, Calidus shares a rumor that's unverified and probably exaggerated, that Aiden comes from an uncivilized Chimerian mountain tribe and that he helped his people commit mass suicide. He then went on to kill a dozen Praetorians before being captured. However, it is just a rumor. We don't know if this is true yet. Calidus then offers a critique of the Academy and the Republic itself. The system, he claims, is inherently unfair. It's not made to reward merit, but to reflect and preserve the existing hierarchy. He argues that most of the students, including himself and Vis, owe their success not to their talent, but to their birthright and political infrastructure. Even when someone like Vis rises from nothing, there's people like Dualtatis that are there to make sure that the system stays unchanged. Now, to back up this critique, Calidus shows data that he stole from his father, who has access to all the censor records, and he outlines how the supposed pyramid of advancement is really a narrow tower. Only around 60,000 sexti exist within the Republic, much less than what they pretend. Even the 174 students that joined the Academy this year are there to fill in the vacancies in the power structure to ensure that the privileged take that place, rather than giving an opportunity for the deserving. Calidus says, the Republic rewards people who take, not who deserve. And this makes Vis realize that his well-earned efforts might not be enough to outmaneuver Dualtatus within the system's bounds. When asked why he's in Class 7, Calidus says that he'll tell him another time, and he urges Vis to not share any of this information. That night, Vis sneaks from the dormitory with some climbing gear that he MacGyvered from a saddle plate and stirrups, and he scales the academy wall. It's not graceful, but he clears it and then vanishes into the woods. After half an hour, he reaches the ruins, a shattered complex centered around a domed building illuminated by floating lanterns. And inside, he finds excavation tools and a rope descending into the depths. He follows, entering a tunnel etched with glowing green script, symbols, and schematics in an unknown language. One diagram eerily seems to show how to create the labyrinth control bracer. He pushes deeper and finds an arched entrance inscribed in Old Vetusian, which translates to, "In trying to become God, they created him." Beyond is a vast green-lit crypt lined with dozens of naked corpses pierced through the chest by an obsidian blade, and the bodies appear fresh, not decayed. At the end, Vis examines a bronze-like panel covered in precise inscriptions, and when he touches it, the floor hums and 3 glowing topographic maps rise from the ground. It shows 2 familiar versions of the island Solivagus, and a third depicting a cratered wasteland with a hovering sphere at its center. As the maps coalesce, disembodied voices whisper in Vetusian.
Obatium is lost. Do not open the gate. Synchronous is death. Obatium is lost. Do not open the gate. Synchronous is death.
Around him, the corpse's eyelids snap open, bleeding empty sockets, and their mouths move in unison, repeating the message. And Vis does what anyone would do in the situation and runs. Above, he hides as Viridius and a man named Marcus respond to the triggered alarm. Viridius enters the ruins, while Marcus is sent to inspect the dormitories, including the 6th. Vis races back, bloodies his hand on the wall spike, and barely makes it into bed. Aiden, waiting, covers for him and simply says in Chimerian, "Strange dream." Marcus arrives moments later and grills Aiden, but gets nothing, and once alone, Vis reflects on what he saw. The whispers echo Siror's final note, and the corpses with their eyeless gaze remind him of Lannistia, and now he holds knowledge the Republic seems desperate to bury. In the morning, Vis stages a dramatic tumble down the mess hall stairs as he's holding a knife, and he reopens the wound that he got the other night in front of everyone. Praeceptor Faria sends him to the infirmary, and there, Olnius kind of sees through his story. But he doesn't push things any further, he stitches up the wound, and he does mention that Viridius was looking for any unusual injuries. A clear indication that the Principalis is looking for whoever triggered the alarm the night before. At lunchtime, Amisa is impressed that the rumors are true that Vis and Aiden completed the labyrinth together. Belly isn't impressed, and she storms off, and this is when Vis realizes for the first time that she's missing a finger. Now, Calidus then finally opens up to Vis about why he's in Class 7. He reveals that he wanted to be placed there, and then goes on to outline the rising instability of Katen. Military's power is dwindling as expansion has ceased, while governance and religion fight for control. Budget cuts mean that civil war isn't just possible, but likely. In this climate, being a high-profile son of a powerful senator makes Calidus a liability, either as a hostage or a target. By stepping down to Class 7 and playing the fool, he lowers his profile so that if war comes, religion won't even want to use him. But he can still open doors using his Aresius name. He's simply trying to avoid a sapper's fate. As Vis watches another round of labyrinth failures, he thinks about his father's belief that a liar loses a part of himself in the act. And this reflection stings more than usual because Vis has been lying to nearly everyone. Aiden joins him and casually asks in Chimerian if Vis killed someone. Vis denies it quickly, explaining that the blood was his, and Aiden seems almost disappointed, but when Vis thanks him for covering, Aiden brushes it off, saying, "You are doing something they disapprove of. No thanks are needed." His disdain for the Katenin system is clear. Testing the waters, Vis shares that he had a Chimerian tutor named Cullen who taught him language, music, and dance, and Aiden seems to soften at this, quoting Chimerian poetry, but when asked about his own family, he shuts down. Eventually, Vis decides to tell Aiden about the ruins, the glowing Vetusian script, the schematics of the labyrinth's bracer, the map, and the eyeless corpses impaled on obsidian swords, but he leaves out the part where they moved and spoke to him, for fear of sounding completely unhinged. When Aiden asks who he's working for, Vis admits that he's working for military to uncover what religion is doing on Solivagus. Aiden seems a little disgusted by this answer, but he lets it pass, and he extracts a price for his silence. Vis will help him with speaking common, and Vis agrees. Then, as always, Dultatis ruins the mood. He demands to know what they were whispering about, and Aiden unleashes a storm of creative Chimerian insults, which Vis translates with as much deadpan charm as he can as polite compliments. And as Aiden keeps escalating the insults, he can barely keep it together. After Dultatis storms off, and Aiden surprises Vis by saying, "Today was not such a bad day." A storm rolls in as the Festival of the Ancestors begins, a 2-day pilgrimage to Agaris and the Necropolis to honor the dead. While students are excited, Calidus reveals that he's not going. His father has forbidden him from attending, framing it as part of their shared deception to protect him. And before departure, Principalis Viridius makes a rare visit to the mess hall. He checks on Vis's healed hand and ends his stable duty penance. He then mentions the new Titan security protocols. Praeceptor Skeetus will escort them, return passes are required, and the Transvex routes are randomized, and the Necropolis is heavily guarded. He then gives a final request, saying, "Pour out an offering from me, and remember what I told you about grief fading into bitterness." It's clear he's implying that Ulkiskor's grief can twist into self-deception. Vis boards the Transvect, joined by Iqua, then Amisa and Indol follow, and despite their higher rank, they declare that outside the Academy walls, they're all equals. Now, Iqua reveals some information. Iroh lost his 9-year-old sister at the Naumachia, and his family resents Vis being named Katenicus. This explains why Iroh is so hostile to Vis. Now, Iqua's admission also hints at her own conflicted loyalties. Her father, she admits, is also not really a Telemus supporter. As the Transvect approaches, we see lantern-lit grave fields sprawl across the plain, divided by eternal fires, where most Katenin bodies are cremated. Towering behind them is the Necropolis, a mountain range pocked with private mausoleums for the elite. It's a morbidly majestic sight. Now, as Vis disembarks, he's immediately swarmed by a crowd, calling him Katenicus, and it's clear he's gained the respect of many people due to his actions at the Naumachia. Ulkiskor appears, pulling Vis into the public role of affectionate son. He then leads him up the mountain toward the Telemus Mausoleum. Ulkiskor is disappointed in his slow advancement, and Vis mentions Dultatis' bias and proposes that Ulkiskor pressure Praeceptor Tadia to drop a student for exchange. Ulkiskor agrees to consider it only if Vis proves his value. Now, the Telemus family tomb is lavish, and here we see a device called a Vitarium, which holds Ulkiskor's uncle's preserved body. And Lannistia explains that this is a device that preserves things from decay by force-feeding will into them. I just thought this was a really interesting world-building detail. Now, Vis recounts all the strange stuff that he saw in the ruins, but he leaves out the whispered words and the moment the corpse is reanimated, and Ulquiskor and Lannistia interrogate every detail. He confirms it likely has pre-cataclysm origins, and perhaps this is something religion wants to claim or awaken. Now, Vis then asks for some help creating a two-part imbued grapple, strong enough to launch and reel him from the transvect onto the cliffs on the island's far side. Ulquiskor agrees to make it, but warns him to destroy it if anyone finds it. Their next meeting won't be until the trimester break. Later, Vis finds Lannistia staring into the valley's fires. She confesses uncertainty about wanting answers to her condition, and warns Vis that Ulquiskor nearly ended their arrangement, and if Vis hadn't investigated the ruins, this meeting might never have happened. She tells him to do better. Inside the crypt, he meets Ulquiskor's parents, Larius and Milena. Larius is warm and grandfatherly, while Milena kind of radiates judgment. She's displeased by an outsider's presence on the day meant to honor Siror. Then Ulquiskor summons his wife, and when she enters, Vis freezes. It's Sadochia, the woman who helped sabotage the transvect, the Anguis agent who shot Ulquiskor. Relukia, aka Sadochia, glides into the tomb like a perfect politician's wife, smiling and smothering Vis with kisses and questions to hide his surprise. Vis barely manages to hold himself together, realizing she's not here to kill him, so the Anguis still want to use him. Larius conducts a solemn ritual before a Vitarium preserving Siror's body. And during the ritual, Vis's guilt surges. He recalls the fate of his own family, likely executed and discarded after Zeus fell, and for the first time in years, he truly grieves them. Now after this, Relukia invites Vis on a walk, and out of earshot, the mask drops. She confirms what Vis suspected: Estevan's death was planned. The Anguis attack on Katen was never meant to succeed. It was meant to wound, to poison the blade. And now they need a sleeper agent inside the system. They want Vis to reach Class 3, win the Eutychium, and become Domitor, the top student. From there, he can request any post, including in Katenan governance. If he proves useful, the Anguis promise they'll let him go. Now, she then says that she'll meet him during the Festival of Platuna in Katen during the next break. But Vis pushes for more answers. Why was Zeus destroyed? Who else is watching him? But Relukia only gives partial answers. They've been watching him for a long time. She even manipulated Natio's transfer to the Laten's prison so that Ulquiskor would notice him. Now, Vis then wants to know, will the Anguis destroy the Aurora Columni? Will they dismantle the system of will itself? And Relukia simply says no. They don't even know where all the Auroras are, and instead the Anguis plan to wait until the ruling class falters, then replace them. And this is when Vis snaps.
If all you're trying to do is change who's in control, then you don't really want to change anything.
Relukia simply replies,
you have to start somewhere.
When Vis confesses that he couldn't do to himself what Estevan did, the woman replies, you cannot be free if you are afraid to die. She then strides back into the group, smiling. Later on, after saying goodbyes, Ulquiskor warns Vis to be wary of Relukia. Her charming persona hides a sharp, calculating mind, and he reveals that their marriage was arranged for political reasons after Siror's death, and she's rarely home. He then drops all pretense and confronts Vis about his origins, saying he knows that Vis is not the Aquarian orphan that he claims to be. He says he doesn't care about his past, but he demands to know whether it poses a risk, and Vis refuses to explain, but he vows by the gods to uncover what happened to Siror, and swears his past will not interfere. And at this, the man accepts the promise, and notes that Vis reminds him of Siror. Now, at the Transvect platform, Ulquiskor hands him what he requested, 2 magnetic stone cuffs that violently snap together when closed, functioning as a makeshift grapple, and he warns that mistiming the maneuver could break bones or even tear off his hand. He also receives a paired set of locator stones, one to drop during the jump and the other to guide his return. And a little while later, Vis clings to the underside of the Transvect, hidden and freezing as it races through the night sky towards Solivagus. At the precise moment, he jumps, plunging into the sea within the seawall's protective boundary. He swims to shore, drops a locator stone to mark the return point, and then by dawn, scraped and exhausted, he reaches a vantage point overlooking a town-sized complex of ruins. At its center rises a massive crimson dome. He finds the symbol of the hierarchy carved above a Vetusian inscription reading Lucium Obitium Res. Remember, but do not mourn. This reminds him of the phrase from Siror's message, and he speaks it aloud. Lucium Obitium Sintres Exunis. In response, the emblem splits open with a mechanical roar, revealing a stairway descending into darkness. Torch in hand, Vis enters. The tunnel soon reveals a corridor lined with corpses impaled by obsidian, identical to the macabre display in the ruins near the academy. At the end of the corridor, a narrow platform juts out over a vast abyss, and as Vis steps onto it, the floor lurches forward, his torch falls, tumbling endlessly into the void, and moments later, the platform begins to descend, lowering him beneath the mountain into an ancient, vast chamber. Suddenly, a ragged, eyeless man appears.
Who in all the goddamn hells are you?
I was known as Artemius Cell. I was a traitor to the commandment of isolation. I attempted to gain synchronism and remove the seal to Obitium during the rebellion of the 7th era after the rending. I have thus been lawfully condemned to servitude, guiding those who come after.
The eyeless, long-dead traitor speaks eerily robotic and explains that this is a place to test basic proficiency. If passed, it allows access to something called Obitium and Lucium, though true access, called synchronism, is reserved for leadership. The test lies in crossing the room with the aid of a control bracer, just like those used in the Academy's labyrinth. Now, when Vis dons the bracer, massive black walls erupt from the stone, forming a new labyrinth. Vis removes the bracer and plans to come back. He asks why the bracer is required, and Artemius warns that remnants guard the path, that a cord is too strong near the gate, and offers to demonstrate. Artemius then steps into the invisible threshold, and dark glass-like creatures, remnants, surge into being, rolling waves of razor shards, and tear Artemius to pieces. Moments later, a new guide appears, Alia Veranius, equally eyeless and equally scripted. She offers the same bracer and the same warnings, but Vis is horrified and refuses, and with no time left, he makes his way out of the ruins. As he races through the forest to make the final transvect, he hears whimpering downstream and finds a wounded Alupai pup, a species of large, intelligent wolves native to the island Solivagus. With knife in hand, he considers killing it out of mercy, but there's something in the pup's fearful defiance, its helplessness, that reminds him too much of himself. He names it Diago and tends to its wounds with a torn cloth, feeds it fish, and leaves it swaddled in his cloak. And revived by the brief rest, he makes his way to the beach and the locator needle, and Vis identifies the correct anchoring point, hides his clothes beneath rocks, and swims out into the freezing water. But he fumbles the magnetic grapple cuff and drops it. He dives in the water, lungs burning, and slams into the seawall, but by sheer luck, he finds the cuff and clamps it on just as the transvect passes overhead. The force yanks him from the sea, nearly tearing off his arm, and slams him into the underside of the carriage. He claws his way inside and retrieves the clothes that he stashed the night before, changing and disposing of the evidence, and back at the academy, he's greeted by Preceptor Tadia, who casually asks about a missing student named Farian. Later, he makes his way back to the dormitory and is seen only by Aiden, who notes that he looks awful and leaves it at that. Vis grins, then collapses with exhaustion into bed. When he awakes, Calidus breaks the news that Farian, a student in class 4, is dead. Apparently, it was self-inflicted. He had failed to advance as expected and likely cracked under pressure from his family at the necropolis. And now the tragedy hits Vis harder than expected. He barely knew the student, but the idea of being trapped, weighed down by expectations, feels painfully familiar. But he can't shake the thought, did Relukia engineer this outcome to help him move up? Regardless, because of that death, Vis should be moving up to class 5. But during class, Dultatus acts like nothing happened. He doesn't mention anything about advancement. Then at the end of the day, Tadia storms in, confronting Dultatus directly and demanding to know why Vis hasn't been submitted. Dultatus smugly nominates Yannix, a student he says has superior swordsmanship. Now, Tadia offers a solution, a formal training duel between Vis and Yannix, overseen by the Academy. The winner advances to class 5. Now Vis accepts without hesitation, and Yannix, clearly pleased, agrees as well. But as Aiden quietly points out afterwards, Yannix is the reigning dueling champion, one of the best in the Republic. Dultatus also assigns him stable duty in order to sabotage his preparation. At the stables, Amisa finds him and offers help. She's already fetched a Modus suits, will-imbued training armor used in the Academy duels, and Vis has no idea how they work. They meet with Aiden in the gym, and Amisa explains the workings of the Amotus, a will-locked system where light wooden armor synchronizes with floating steel armor that mirrors the wearer's movements. A successful strike behind an armor piece disables the real limb with repulsion magic. A clean hit to the head, neck, or chest ends the match. Aiden completely wipes the floor with him at first, but Vis adapts fast and leans on the flowing swordplay style of Seuss. By the third round, he wins, and after that, he never loses again. Between fights, Aiden opens up. He says he was trained by Chimerian bladesmiths, once the greatest swordsmasters in the world. He also admits that he couldn't beat Yannix. That's how good Yannix is. Now later in Chimerian, Aiden teases Vis about Amisa's interests, and Vis does admit that he likes her as well. And this is when Amisa walks by and says something in Chimerian, making them aware that she's overheard everything. Later on, Calidus confronts Vis about his true identity. He suspects that he's an illegitimate son of some powerful senator, probably from military, and Vis neither confirms nor denies, letting the lie breathe. Calidus walks away, hurt that his friend won't tell him the truth. The next day, Vis arrives in the Quadrum to find it packed with students from every class and the full panel of Preceptors. However, he doesn't see Calidus in the crowd, and this saddens him. Yannix enters in gleaming Amotus armor, confident and showy, and Vis suits up and the duel begins. Yannix immediately proves himself a skilled and aggressive fighter, faster and stronger than Vis expected. But Vis plays the long game, staying defensive and waiting for an opening, and when it comes, he lands a precise strike to Yannix's knee, one that should have disabled the limb via the Amotus will lock system, but nothing happens. It's pretty clear that someone is cheating. Vis halts the bout and challenges the results, and Tadia tests the gear, but everything works fine. at least as she's supervising. The match resets and Vis scores another hit, this time to the shoulder, and still no reaction. Now it's clear the armor is rigged. He knows that protesting again will make him seem like a sore loser, and there's likely not going to be any post-match investigation. If Yannix wins, the injustice will stand. So, enraged and desperate, Vis throws his sword, then charges Yannix, tackling him to the ground. The crowd is in shock as Vis disarms Yannix, pins him, and overcome by fury, smashes his helmet into the stone repeatedly until the boy loses consciousness. The Emotus still remains active, but Vis pulls the helmet off manually, revealing blood and confirming the victory for all to see. He then tosses the helmet at the feet of Dultatus, blood splattering the Praeceptor's toga. He's filled with rage, but then calms when he notices that Calidus is in the background with a raised fist and a smile on his face. He'd been watching the whole time, cheering for his friend's victory. Instead of angrily accusing Dultatus of rigging the match, he calmly says, "It seems you need to check the equipment again." He's declared the winner and gains the promotion to Class 5, and the other Praeceptors remain silent, shocked by the violent display and obvious implications of cheating. The crowd parts as Vis leaves the quadrum. The morning after his duel, Vis settles into the Class 5 dorm and later reunites with Calidus and cautiously offers a partial admission that Calidus was right about him hiding something, and while he doesn't reveal the truth, he hints that the consequences of discovery would be ruinous. Calidus is visibly relieved, and he takes that as enough. Their banter and their friendship is restored, but Calidus has something of his own to confess. Digging through his father's census access, he found disturbing patterns. Students, specifically from Class 3 and 4, have died during the Eutychium. Others who graduated into high positions have quietly disappeared. These events are silently buried with coin, favors, and documents that bind students to secrecy. Calidus warns him that advancing into Class 4 or beyond puts him at serious risk, and while Vis acknowledges this, he has no choice but to keep climbing. In the weeks that follow, Vis trains relentlessly. He learns complex academic topics with Calidus, Amisa sometimes joining them, and he thrives in the structured environment of Class 5. Evenings are spent tutoring Aiden, who once given a proper instructor in his own language, begins progressing rapidly. Vis becomes convinced that Aiden belongs in a higher class, but he was held back due to Dultatus's prejudice and his own language barrier. Unfortunately, there's no consequences at all for the cheating during the duel. In fact, the faculty pretends the duel was clean. And then just 2 days into week 4, just as Calidus predicted, Vis is promoted to Class 4. In the next chapter, he meets his new Praeceptor of Class 4, Scetus. Scetus can tell that Vis is very intelligent, but he warns that intellect alone isn't enough. Senators must persuade, connect, and build alliances, traits that Vis hasn't shown. And to remain in Class 4, Scetus demands that Vis eat and study with his new classmates. And when he joins them in the mess hall, their reception is cautious but not hostile. Axion greets him first, and Vis quickly picks up on the social divides. Military-aligned students like Axion, Cassia, and Tem are the most welcoming, while those from religion or governance remain more aloof. Equa, at least, is friendly, even noting that they'll be partners for the next Labyrinth run. The class gradually accepts his presence, and as he leaves, Scetus offers a subtle nod of approval. Later in the Biblioteca, Vis meets up with Aiden. When Vis shares that he has to befriend his classmates, Aiden warns that this is how the hierarchy molds people, not through one drastic demand, but through a series of subtle compromises. Each man, Aiden says, must know where his line is and refuse to cross it. And Vis assures him he has such a line and has already been forced to define it. Then Aiden shares something unexpected. The altercation on Vis's first day, the one that led led to Vis punching him and being punished was orchestrated. Principalis Viridius suggested that Aiden provoke Calidus to satisfy the powerful figures targeting his father, and hinted that he'd offer Aiden help in return. And then, as they walk back, Aiden reveals an even darker truth. Before coming to the academy, he spent nearly a year in a sapper because he killed 3 Praetorians. And thinking that Vis might want to distance himself after hearing this, he offers to release him from their tutoring. But Vis refuses and says they're friends. And as Aiden walks away, he notices he's smiling. Now, Class 4 ramps up in difficulty. Under Skeetus's razor-sharp guidance, every session becomes a battle of wits. During the debates, Vis makes sure to stay independent, supporting ideas on merit rather than allegiance. 5 days in, they enter the labyrinth for a team run. Vis is teamed with Iqua, and Iroh manages to distract Vis by whispering vile insults about Iqua, making him fumble and messing up Iqua's run. Iqua is frustrated, and on their second run with the roles reversed, Iqua proves unshakable to Iroh. Vis navigates the maze flawlessly. He finishes the run in 10 minutes, soaked in sweat, but victorious. Now later on, Indol invites Vis to join a military training retreat over the trimester break with the Thirds, Amisa, Belly, and Indol himself. It's an unexpected honor that was initiated at the request of Indol's influential father to repay Vis's role in the Naumachia. Recognizing the opportunity to advance politically and train, he accepts, but then Indol mentions that the retreat will take place on the warm seaside island of Seuss. The blood drains from his face. Vis is going to be returning home for the first time in years. He's haunted by memories of his father's bloodied face and the image of his sister, Carinza, being swept out to sea. The thought of returning and being recognized terrifies him, and his focus in class slips. Only the upcoming festival of Platuna offers a chance at reprieve, and Vis hopes he can meet Relukia in secret during the citywide celebration. However, now Iqua has publicly invited him to join the Fourths during the festival, so it's going to be hard to slip away. At dinner, Iqua questions Vis on his whereabouts during the Festival of the Ancestor, and if he saw Therian, the student who was recently found dead. Iqua seems to let it go after a while, but clearly she's suspicious. The next morning, in the labyrinth, Vis and Calidus realize the entire system, powered by will and complex conditionals, is over-engineered for just a training tool. Calidus thinks it's weirdly complex and too elaborate. They both agree the labyrinth likely serves a deeper, hidden function. His father won't let him go to the Festival of Platuna, but he urges Vis to have fun and makes him promise to bring back stories. And then the day of the festival arrives, a day of sanctioned gambling, feasting, and chaotic celebration. As the Transvect descends into the city of Katen, Skeetus discreetly issues Vis a tracking stone for safety. Definitely not for surveillance. Once on the streets, Class 4 begins to splinter, Iqua drifts toward Foundation matches, and others explore the entertainment, and seizing the opportunity, Vis slips away. An unseen, will-imbued tug on his cloak guides him through Katen's alleys. Somebody is guiding him with will, and he finally reaches a nondescript home. Inside waits Relukia. Relukia wastes no time. She confirms that Vis's promotion to Class 4 was enabled by the murder of a student at the necropolis, orchestrated by the Anguis to create an opening. Vis is horrified and warns,
"You kill somebody else because of me, and we're done. Consequences be damned."
Relukia simply says if there's an equally effective alternative, then they'll choose that next time. Vis is hoping that maybe she can help him avoid his upcoming trip to Seuss, but to his dismay, she planned the entire thing. The military is holding a secret summit on Seuss, and Relukia wants him to eavesdrop on the final, most private political meeting that includes Domitius Keyskull, Indol's father, and excludes lower-ranked senators like like Ulkiskor. She's going to send him with a will-locked stylus so that he can pass on the intelligence. And she believes that since this summit takes place in Vis's ancestral palace, then he'll know the secret passageways to find the meeting. Vis demands to know why Relukia, a clear beneficiary of the hierarchy, fights to destroy it. She responds with brutal clarity.
The decision may have been made by the few, Diago, but it's the will of the many that killed your family.
Vis refuses to embrace her extremism. She labels his compassion as a weakness, warning him not to grow attached to his classmates because they are the enemy. And just as he prepares to leave, she delivers her final condition.
If you fail, I will kill one of your friends.
Staggered, Vis retaliates.
You hurt any of them, and on my oath, I will burn you and the Anguis to the ground.
When he leaves, he makes a tear in his cloak to sever her imbued will, then he silently follows her through the streets. He doesn't really have any concrete plan, he just wants to watch her and see if there's anything he can use against her. Relukia meets with a scar-faced man in a ramshackle building, and Vis hears them bartering something, a ship, in exchange for a cataclysm weapon. The man mysteriously mentions they've figured out how to use it as an anchoring point. Now, to me, this kind of suggests that this weapon can control or lock movement between worlds. They're also concerned about who might be able to come back, and they agree that our man should be the only one they can question. On the table, Vis sees 3 severed heads, grisly proof that these aren't empty threats. When the man suddenly vanishes from the room, then reappears seconds later at the door, Vis is too shaken to linger. Whatever will-based weapon they're using may be able to warp physical space or time. None of this information really gives him what he needs. He doesn't have anything he can use as blackmail. So he begins to walk back to his classmates, only to realize that he's being followed. 2 men tail him into an alley, and they're not subtle. When Vis confronts them, they reveal themselves as Anguis, out for revenge over Melior's death. Their eyes turn black as they begin using will and attack. Vis manages to briefly gain the upper hand, punching one in the throat, slamming the other into a wall, but he's outmatched. Overpowered and dragged deeper into the alley, he braces for death, but then he hears a familiar voice, Praeceptor Skedis, stepping into the light, and behind him, Equa. The entire thing was staged. They explain that Equa believed Vis was secretly using will and cheating his way up the ranks in the academy, and she convinced Skedis to help expose him. The 2 attackers were Anguis, yes, but they were part of the plan. They were meant to push Vis until he snapped and used will to defend himself. But the fact that he didn't proves that he was clean. He didn't cheat. Skedis apologizes, and Equa does too, but she is visibly shaken, and she begs Vis not to tell anyone. And as you can imagine, the ride back to the academy is an awkward one. No one else knows what happened, but they can tell there's a strain between Vis, Equa, and Skedis. Later that night, Vis goes looking for Calidus and learns that he went on a walk with Belly. He eventually finds them and listens in, but it doesn't appear like there's any romance between them, as he suspected. It looks more like they're arguing. He leaves it be, but he hopes that Calidus will tell him about his secret relationship. Now, in the days that follow, it's clear that Skedis is now favoring Vis and holding him to the same rigorous standards that he once held Equa to. Equa avoids Vis as much as she can, and it appears their uneasy alliance has fractured. Eventually, the trimester break arrives. Vis boards a transvect bound for Seuss, along with Indol, Amisa, and Belly. He's going back to the island where his family was murdered, returning to the palace he once fled in flames, carrying a spy mission he didn't ask for, under the threat of his friends' lives. It's a very messy situation. Moving on to part 3. Now, as before, the title of part 3 is a well-known Latin phrase, in cauda venenum, which translates to poison in the tail. Romans would use this to describe the scorpion, whose dangerous part is in the tail despite the showy pincers. And they'd use it metaphorically to describe a person or a piece of work that has a nasty or unpleasant surprise at the end. It was used by the Roman poet Marcus of Valerius Martialis of the 1st century AD, whose poems often had a satirical twist at the conclusion. Oh, and this phrase is also the name of the 13th album of Swedish metal band Opeth.
Nice.
Is James Islington a metal fan, or is he simply giving us some foreshadowing for what's to come? In chapter 52, nothing can prepare Vis for the sight of home. Shops have sprouted like weeds along the coast. The entire landscape feels manicured. Belly quips that Seuss was one of the last places to be civilized, and Indol cheerfully adds that it was basically tribal before Katennin's arrival. And Vis nearly draws blood, biting back his response. The climb to the palace doesn't help. The path he once knew has been carved into elegant, wheel-shaped stairs, but it's the palace itself that totally guts him. Gone are the ancestral carvings, his family's history that was etched into the stone, replaced now by Katennin history and smooth stone. However, inside the palace, the layout is still unchanged, so he can still feel the shape of the home beneath the layers of conquest. Then comes the arrival of Domitius Keyskull, Indol's father and the man who helped conquer Seuss. He's charismatic and powerful, and when he praises Vis for the Naumachia and extends a hand as an equal, Vis shakes his hand with a vast amount of effort. And then he notices Fadrike. Once a royal advisor in Seuss, Fadrike now wears tinted glasses and the rank of Sextus. He fears that Fadrike is going to recognize him and turn him in. However, he walks past Vis without recognition. Later on, he chooses the guest room that has access to a secret passage behind the fireplace, knowing that this will give him access to the secret meeting. In his room, he kind of has a breakdown. He is fearful that he's going to be caught by Fadrike or somebody is going to recognize him. In the next chapter, Ulquiskor knocks on the door, and Lannistia at his side. They greet him with rehearsed affection. Before they depart for dinner, Ulquiskor produces a slim wooden box, and inside is a gold-plated stylus engraved with "Stronger Together." It's a gift from Vis's mother, Relukia, a symbol of familiar pride that twists like a knife in his chest. Ulquiskor plays the role of proud father, parading Vis through the crowd of senators, each praising him for his bravery at the Naumachia. Then Indol tells Vis that Keyskull wants to talk with him. Vis joins the Domitius at the table, acutely aware of the trap that conversation with a powerful man can be. The senator is razor sharp, his questions circling like a predator's. He wants details about the Naumachia, not for gossip, but for intelligence. As the questioning tightens, Vis finally discerns Keyskull's real focus. He wants to know about the weapon that Estevan used, the Anguis device that shattered the arena. The Domitius is probing for weaknesses, looking for a way to understand or replicate it. The tension only gets higher each time Fadrike appears to whisper in Keyskull's ear. Vis's muscles seize at every sight of him, terrified that voice or mannerism is going to betray who he really is. But still, Fadrike shows no sign of recognition. The dinner drags on, and the food is a mockery of Seuss, local dishes butchered into Katennin forms, and Keyskull lies about how bloodless the conquest was, how the people of Seuss welcomed civilization. Vis swallows rage with every bite. Amisa pulls him away and saves him from the questioning for a little bit as they banter, but then Ulquiskor introduces himself to her, and And later in private, he tells Vis that he needs to be careful of her. She was the one who gave him the drink after the Transvect attack. I don't remember if I mentioned it earlier, but when Vis awakened in the academy after the Transvect attack, he was acting more woozy than normal and more talkative than he'd normally be when Viridius came to question him. So Ulquiskor believes he might have been drugged when handed a cup of water. Vis then returns to his room, enters the hidden passageway, and maps the route he's going to take later. The next day is beach day. Indol and Amisa swim while Vis and Belly stay back. Vis claims he doesn't like to swim, but really it's the painful memory of his sister. He once played with his siblings on this beach, but now it just reminds him of the death of his sister, Carinsa, whose body he once tried to revive on this very shore. Belly invites him to play Foundation, and he pretends that he's not good. He then tries to subtly get her opinion on Calidus, and she makes it clear that she doesn't really like him. And then Fadrike arrives to escort them into town, still not showing any signs of recognition. Amisa playfully hints at sneaking out for a late night swim and invites Vis, but he's too focused on his mission and scouting the palace tunnels to flirt, so he denies her. Vis grows uneasy in town. Too many locals might recognize him, and he can't afford exposure. Fadrike blathers on about Seuss's supposed progress under hierarchy rule, his propaganda thinly veiled, but Vis silently seethes. This man betrayed his family. Meanwhile, Amisa jokes about a potential budding romance between Indol and Belly, teasing Vis about his obliviousness and his own admirers. It's kind of a light moment that contrasts with Vis's brooding observations of how Seuss has changed. The town is busier, it's paved, industrialized, but the people seem hollow. The vibrance that he remembers has been drained away by Octavie conditioning. They arrive at a well-known local tavern, and the owner, Menendo, bluntly tells Fadrike that he isn't welcome. He calls out the invasion and the hanging of the royal family and throws them out. The town hasn't forgotten, and their quiet rage and loyalty to the fallen king brings Vis to the verge of tears. However, Indol is embarrassed and he fumes about this insult, but Fadrike quietly takes the blame and steers the group away. The next day, Indol mentions the embarrassment to Vis, and Vis manages to convince him to not take any action. Indol then mentions that Amisa went for a swim at the lagoon, and alarm hits Vis like a slap. The tide is going out, and the riptide at the lagoon is deadly. Without another word, he breaks into a sprint, and what follows is a tense, frantic sequence as Vis races across the cliffs by moonlight, tracking Amisa's form in the dark waters below. He leaps off a bluff, a 50-foot drop, and fights the current to reach Amisa just as she begins to go under. He eventually navigates them into a narrow sea cave that he remembers from childhood, and in the safety of the cave, Amisa breaks down and falls asleep in his arms. When morning comes, they talk for a while, and Amisa spots the scars on Vis's back and is horrified about the pain he went through, and Vis deflects, saying that he got them at the orphanage. In a moment of vulnerability and honesty, Amisa confides that Indol hates his father and plans to swear to religion rather than military. Basically a dangerous seismic secret within the Republic's ranks. And she trusts Vis to keep it secret. And then finally, after days of tension and flirting, they share a kiss. It's about time. And then they share another one. And another. Listen, what happens in the cave stays in the cave. At low tide, they make their way back to the beach. The local villagers give them food and clothes, and a fisherman ferries them back to the palace. Vis, careful to preserve his cover, begins crafting a believable story, explaining that a local told him about the riptide, and he appears hoarse and fatigued so that no one else questions his early night. In the evening, Ulquiskor and Lanastia visit him, and he accuses Vis of playing the hero a little too well. A hero hero straight from a goddamn saga, he says, aware that whispers of Vis's relationship with Amisa are beginning to circulate. He repeats his warning that Amisa is not to be trusted, but Vis insists that he's being careful, but still the tension kind of remains. Ulquiskor wants an update on the ruins, and Vis, exhausted but honest, recounts what he saw: the red dome, the hidden chamber, and Ulquiskor listens closely, piecing together implications, growing more certain that the labyrinth within the ruins must be run, and Vis is the one who must do it. If Vis can't find proof of what happened to Siror before the Eutychium, Ulquiskor threatens to sentence him to the sappers. Lannistia tries to agree with Vis that he's already fulfilled his end, but Ulquiskor is unmoved. So Lannistia simply tells him to train hard and to not die. Good advice. Vis fakes illness to skip the day's events, and he sneaks into the palace tunnels to spy on the secret meeting. Now, during this meeting, a senator presents a list of suspected conspirators and other senators vulnerable to coercion. Vis records names on his tablet and memorizes damning personal details like vices, affairs, illegitimate children, business ties, or sympathies with other factions. He memorizes and deletes 3 specific names to keep for himself, hoping they'll prove useful later. The meeting then pivots to the Festival of Yovan and the Anguis attack, and to Vis's horror, he learns it was military sanctioned. Kieskul claims it was a necessary sacrifice to deflect suspicion. The Domidius now proposes a new plan: secretly supply the Anguis with weapons, will designs, and even a ship. Several senators object, but Kieskul asserts dominance and pushes this plan. Vis begins to understand the full scope of military's treason, and he realizes that Relukia must have sent him here to ensure military is upholding their end of a secret agreement with the hierarchy. As he heads back through the tunnels, he rounds a corner and stops. Someone is waiting for him in the shadows. Fadrike. But instead of sounding an alarm, Fadrike greets him with awe and reverence, dropping to his knees and calling him Master Diago, my prince. At first, Vis is defensive, demanding to know how a citizen of Seuss could accept a role under the hierarchy, but Fadrike explains that he didn't want to. The position, the will, the title, it was all forced upon him as a requirement to protect Seuss.
They said if I wished to act on behalf of Seuss, then I had to accept everything that came with the job.
Vis realizes Fadrike isn't an enemy. He lifts him to his feet and forbids kneeling, saying there's no royal family in Seuss anymore. But Fadrike refuses to believe it. As far as he's concerned, Vis is and always will be the prince. The man then reveals that Cortus Latani, the man who ordered the assault on Seuss and oversaw the royal family's execution, is here on the island, and he offers to kill him if Vis gives the word. But Vis declines.
There's being brave, and then there's throwing your life away.
Killing Latani would doom Fadrike to a sapper and leave Seuss without one of its only advocates. Instead, Vis thanks him for what he's done and sacrificed, saying his father would be proud and that he is proud of him. When he wants to know more about his family's death, Fadrike confirms that his family was all hanged together, even his older sister, the Princess of Seuss, Isabel. Carinsa, his younger sister, her body was found 2 days later, meaning that his parents might have died thinking that at least 2 of their children, including himself, might have escaped. The revelation shatters Vis. He breaks down sobbing, the weight of this truth finally too much to bear. Fadrike then leads him to a hidden chamber, a lovingly preserved room of Vis's childhood, his mother's bow, his old toys, instruments, even his foundation board, a sanctuary of memory. Vis is stunned and tells the man that this means everything. everything. They sit for hours talking, Federica explaining what happened after the conquest, how riots erupted when the truth of the royal executions came out, how sappers were used to crush dissent, how citizens slowly caved under fear, one by one visiting the Aurora Columni, until resistance faded into bitter quiet. This learns that the hierarchy didn't win by force alone, they won by making people forget what they were fighting for. When Federica asks about the Naumachia, Vis admits the truth. He stopped the Anguis because thousands of innocents, many of them children, would have died. And Federica actually approves of this, saying he is his parents' son. They speak of Amisa as well, and Vis worries that caring for her might be betrayal, but Federica gently disagrees.
They are the world. If they are all our enemies, we will never be happy.
Before heading back, Vis again tells them that he's proud of him and that he's grateful for what he sacrificed for his people. As Vis awakes the next day, he remembers a talk that he had with his father. His father had asked him what makes a good ruler, only to dismantle every answer that Vis gave. No ruler, he said, could ever truly be good, because human systems are inherently flawed. The hierarchy is worse than most. It isn't corrupted by greed, it's built on it. This conversation stays with Vis, shaping his moral compass and fueling his rejection of the Republic's ideals. Vis copies the intel that he gave using Relucia's stylus, then destroys the evidence and returns above ground. Later at the beach, Indul corners him and reveals that he's guessed Vis's connection to Zeus. He doesn't realize Vis is the prince, but he suspects he's the son of someone closer to the palace. Vis knows that he's been discovered, so he confirms part of it, but he secures Indul's silence by reminding him that he keeps Amisa's secret as well. They share a pact of mutual silence. Now, the next 3 weeks are intense training with Amisa, Indul, and Belly. His relationship stabilizes into something open and unhidden, and on the final evening, Vis returns alone to the Harbor Tavern. To his surprise, Menendo, the same barkeep who threw him out a month earlier, silently serves him a royal feast, the kind once reserved for kings of Zeus. It's a quiet gesture of recognition and loyalty, and after eating, he leaves a pouch of coins on the counter and leaves without saying a word. Leaving Zeus behind for the second and likely final time, Vis doesn't feel like he's fleeing anymore. Now he feels like he's mourning. This time, it feels like Zeus is truly lost to me. When he gets back to the academy, he's greeted by a wildfire of rumors about his rescue romance with Amisa, fueled by gossipy senators. Vis reunites with Calidus in the library, who's already heard the embellished tales. He then plans a new routine, language practice with Calidus and Aiden in the morning, so that he can train with Amisa in the labyrinth at night. And of course, they tease him about what this training with Amisa really is. But Vis knows Ulquiscor's threat still looms, and if he's going to survive running the labyrinth in the dome, then he needs to get better fast. Later that night, Calidus pulls him aside and confesses that before the academy started, he thought he loved Belly. He trusted her enough to show her confidential governance census documents, ones sealed by will and listing suspicious student deaths in class 3 and 4. When he wanted to take those documents back, she didn't give them back. She's been blackmailing him ever since. If she exposes the theft, Calidus's family is finished. So in order to stay safe, he dropped to class 7 on her orders. But now, Belly's growing bolder, demanding intel instead of silence. The documents are likely hidden in the girls' dormitory, but retrieving them is impossible without exposure, so Calidus has given up hope. But Vis promises to figure something out. Advance to 3 and help Calidus. There may be a way I can do both. During a walk to the labyrinth, he shares his plan with Amisa. They're going to provoke Belly into a public foundation match and challenge her for her place in the class. They arrive early and start a staged game in plain view, Vis playing clumsily on purpose, feeding Amisa's easy victories, and it doesn't take long for the trap to spring. Belly, drawn by the crowd and her pride, can't resist commenting on Vis's poor play. Vis then challenges her directly.
Must be nice, thinking that beating the same 5 people all the time makes you an expert.
After a few tense jabs, Belly agrees to the match. With a crowd forming, Iroh gleefully summons Praeceptor Skeetus and Nikias as official witnesses. Belly taunts Vis by offering a handicap, and he responds by removing one of his own stones instead. When she tries to back out, Vis escalates.
Why don't we put stakes on it then? I'll pledge to governance if you win. And if you win, I get your spot in Class 3.
The wager is bold enough to quiet the room, but Belly, sensing a massive political win, accepts. And from the first few moves, Vis sees that Belly is good, but she's too aggressive and overconfident. He starts baiting her with false weaknesses. Belly's confident edge fades as she realizes what looks like sloppy, blunt aggression is actually a calculated sequence of feints designed to dismantle her pyramid. And it works. Vis leans in and offers a draw on one condition.
What you took from Calidus, all of it, right now.
Belly agrees, and during the break, she retrieves the blackmail material, while Calidus confirms its authenticity. Vis ensures that it's secured, then he returns to the table to finish what he started. Belly tries to play for a draw, but Vis doesn't let her.
Not pleasant seeing your trust betrayed, is it?
He says, cutting through her defenses one move at a time. In the crowd, Calidus appears at just the right moment, holding up burned remnants of the stolen documents. Well, fake burned documents. Belly, outplayed and exposed, starts to cry, and 2 moves later, she concedes and flees the hall. Skeetus immediately confirms the victory.
Then I'll see you tomorrow morning, Praeceptor.
The students part to let Vis pass, not just respectfully, but almost reverently. Calidus joins him, stunned but elated.
Remind me to never get on your bad side. God's graves, Vis. Rotting gods. I have no idea how I'm going to repay this. I'm sure I'll think of something, Vis replies, grinning.
His entrance into Class 3 is relentless. Under the cold eye of Praeceptor Nikias, every lesson feels like a battle. Though the Praeceptor clearly dislikes Vis, he doesn't exactly make it obvious because he dislikes everybody in the class. The subject matter is complex, and each day ends with hours in the labyrinth, and just as he's beginning to make real progress, Nikia announces that the Eutychium is going to start early, and the third's rankings are locked in. Indol is at the top, and Vis is at the bottom of the class. As always, the specifics of the trial are kept a secret, but it is revealed that each third has to choose 2 students from lower classes to serve under their command. And obviously, everyone's going to choose students from Class 4, but for Vis, the choice is obvious. He's going to choose Calidus and Iden. Really the only 2 people that he trusts completely. Amisa asks him for a promise. No matter what happens in the Eutychium, it won't affect their relationship. And Vis agrees, knowing that soon he's going to be forced to leave her behind, no matter the outcome. The following morning, Vis approaches Calidus, and unsurprisingly, Calidus is very hesitant, and he urges Vis to drop out of the Eutychium, to not even attend it, or at least to lose early. And then when Iden arrives, Vis extends the same invitation, and Iden accepts right away. He doesn't hesitate, despite knowing that there's a history of deaths during the Eutychium. Honestly, at this point, Iden is a character that really grew on me throughout the book. He's one of my favorite characters in The Will of the Many. Now, Calidus thinks on it, and later he takes Vis to the Class 7 dormitories to show him where he hid the original census documents. The document points to a consistent pattern of accidental deaths during the Eutychium. There's an ongoing cover-up, and it possibly involves multiple factions of the hierarchy. And I mean, Vis is troubled to hear this, but he can't really back down at this point, and eventually Calidus tells him that obviously he's going to join him as well. He just hopes that Vis realizes what he's asking of him. In the next chapter, he heads to Viridius to tell him his team picks, and he defends his choices, but Viridius says that trust is the very foundation that he was hoping students would base their choices on. However, he does warn Vis that he can't press his friends for details on their upcoming briefing. Any such brief of information will result in disqualification and expulsion. The Principalis then questions why Vis is training so relentlessly in the labyrinth despite already having a position in Class 3. And while Vis just says that he has to catch up, Viridius knows there's something more. 2 days later, Aiden privately pulls Vis away and opens up in Chimerian, telling him his story. He speaks about his people's code that honors death as sacrifice and sees survival beyond one's time as a disgrace. When the hierarchy suddenly attacked their hidden mountain tribes, many chose death over submission. Aiden was captured after killing 3 Praetorians, and his father negotiated a bitter deal. In exchange for leadership as a Quintus and the survival of their people, Aiden would serve a year in the sappers and then attend the academy. If he disobeys, all would suffer. Now, despite trusting him and affirming their friendship, Aiden tells him that he can't join him. He refuses to join him in the Eutychium. He can't say why. Doing so would risk both of their futures. But he makes it clear if he joined, he would no longer be someone that Vis could trust, and so he won't. Obviously, Vis is kind of unsettled by this, but he respects the decision. He then seeks out Iqua, as she's the only other student that he kind of trusts, and Iqua is very skeptical. She doesn't understand why Vis would trust her. And he says it's because she apologized and he believed it. Eventually, Iqua agrees to join his team. And when she returns from her interview with Viridius, Iqua is visibly shaken, but she still agrees to join him in the Eutychium. After weeks of training, the dreaded day finally arrives. The Class 3 and their chosen teammates all gather together as Principalis Viridius arrives to announce the challenge. The heart of Jovan, an imbued object that's been removed from the temple, has been hidden somewhere on the island. The student who returns it to the statue wins the Eutychium. If that person happens to be a third, they will be named Domitor and reign supreme over their classmates. And their chosen teammates will rise to the top of Class 4. However, there's a twist. If a student from Class 4 returns the heart, they'll receive a secret reward that was promised to them in private. So basically, betrayal is not just allowed, it's incentivized. The teams are brought to the far side of the island, and each third is given a white medallion that must remain intact to claim victory. Break it or lose it, and you're eliminated. Now, they also receive these colored tracking stones. However, Vis, being at the bottom of the class, only receives 1, and this is basically their compass to find the heart. And then the fourths are given these black medallions that link to the thirds, but they can be transferred, which means their loyalty is fluid. They can join other teams. Now, to ensure safety, everyone in Class 3 has to ingest a small black tracker. If it moves too far from the medallion, 60 safety teams will arrive to extract them. It's kind of a lifeline, but also a tether but for Vis and his real plan, it's an obstacle. Once all the rules are laid bare, it's clear that everybody is now kind of paranoid, not just about their odds of winning, but also of betrayal. Indol takes advantage of this moment and publicly announces to all the Fourths for them to betray their leaders and join him the next day. Now, as Vis swallows the tracker and takes his medallion, Viridius offers a final warning. He tells Vis not to take it too seriously. It's just a game. But I have a feeling we're gonna find out it's not just a game. People are about to die. Once in the forest, Vis immediately heads towards the Forbidden Labyrinth Dome hidden on the western edge of the island. To separate himself from Sexty surveillance, he retches up the swallowed bead and stashes it in his cloak, severing the automated safety system without alerting anyone. As the team travels, they debate their strategy. Calidus favors staking out the heart directly, while Equa argues for ambushing the heart as it's being transported. But Vis rejects both. He proposes another path. Find the Sexty's tracking circles and use them to their own advantage. But before he can explain, the underbrush explodes with motion. A dark figure crashes into Vis, delivering a brutal blow to his arm, then another to his head. Calidus and Equa shout in alarm, but Vis is overwhelmed before he can react, and he blacks out. When he regains consciousness, he's tied to a tree. Calidus is nearby and tied up as well, and Iroh's team, Belly and Felix among them, stand over them. Vis is stunned not just by the ambush, but by how fast Iroh's group got ahead. They've clearly been planning this for some time. Vis notices they haven't destroyed his medallion. He's still technically in the Eutychium. This means that Iroh wants something. To his shock, Equa agrees to switch sides. She doesn't even hesitate. She offers her medallion to Iroh, who links it to his. Equa is now officially part of Iroh's team. She even suggests they keep Vis's medallion intact as a tactical bluff. If others think he's still active, it may give Iroh's team cover to operate without immediate suspicion. Before they leave, Equa recommends stripping Vis and Calidus of their cloaks, claiming they'll no longer need them, and this actually gives Vis a little bit of hope because she knows where his swallowed tracker bead is. It's hidden in his cloak. Hours pass by, night falls, and the two boys sit bound and freezing under the stars. Calidus admits that Viridius offered him Domitor status if he returned the heart himself, but he wanted to stay loyal to Vis. Vis is stunned and grateful, aware of how few people would have done the same. He's incredibly lucky to have a friend like Calidus. They reflect on what the Eutychium reveals about the Republic, that it rewards treachery, not honor. It's about ambition, greed, seeing who will do anything to win. Eventually, Equa returns and cuts them free. After gaining Iroh's trust, she says that she slipped Vis's tracker into Iroh's dinner, hiding it in his stew. In the morning, she'll offer to lead a fake decoy run with Vis's medallion, and when the Sexty detect the tracker inside Iroh's body, separated from Vis's medallion, they'll assume that something went wrong, and the entire group will be disqualified. It's a brilliant plan, and Vis is grateful that she didn't betray them. Now reunited, Vis and Calidus agree to go after one of the circular Sexty tracking devices that track all of the students' locations, while Equa heads back to Iroh's camp to steal Vis's medallion back. Before splitting, he apologizes for ever doubting Equa, and she accepts it, saying he had every reason not to trust her, but now he does, so he should. And now he genuinely does. Eventually, they find the safety team's camp and two men, Boreas and Darin, chatting idly by the fire. Vis and Calidus overhear a cryptic mention that nothing matters until tomorrow night, but they don't exactly know what this means. Boreas sets the tracker down while taking first watch, and Vis devises a distraction. Calidus will circle the camp and lure Boreas away. Plan in motion, Calidus begins loudly singing a lewd academy rhyme in the darkness, and Boreas, baffled and annoyed, wanders toward the sound. When he disappears, Vis slips in and grabs the tracker along with a discarded cloak, but Boreas catches sight of him. The man gives pursuit immediately, eyes turning black. He uses will to uproot and hurl trees towards Vis with terrifying precision. Vis barely escapes, diving into a thick clump of underbrush, lying silent while the furious Sextus stalks the area with torchlight. Just when it seems that his hiding spot is about to be discovered, Darin calls Boreas back to camp. In a final act of rage, the man hurls another tree at random, missing Vis's bush by merely feet before storming off. Vis then inspects the tracker, noticing that the embedded stones don't shift or glow in the moonlight. He doesn't know if it's broken or magically locked, or maybe it's just inactive without context of how to turn it on. He then begins heading west toward the ruins. When he reaches the river, he strips and swims across, hoisting his satchel above the water. And after, when he's trying to get warm, he discovers the cloak that he stole from the Sextus camp is soaked in blood. He washes out the worst of it, but he's not sure whose blood it is, and this leaves him unsettled. He continues on, the forest growing eerily quiet, and when he pauses to test the Sexty tracking plate, a rustle breaks the silence. Vis draws his hunting knife and continues on, and soon a low growl follows him into the moonlight clearing. A massive alupi emerges. The wolf is black-furred and easily half his height. It stares him down, then lunges. Vis is flattened under the weight of the beast. It growls inches from his face, but instead of killing him, the creature withdraws, wary but watchful. Vis notices a distinctive scar down its back and recognizes that it's Diago, the wolf cub that he saved half a year ago, now fully grown and surprisingly big. The alupi circles him in silence, then vanishes into the trees. When he reaches the boundary of the ruins, waiting for him, silent and alert, is the alupi. The two stare each other down. Vis tries inching sideways, but Diago snarls. He speaks the command, Sintres Exunis, and the mountain responds, the red glass pyramid peeling back to reveal the labyrinth's stairwell. Still watched, Vis sets the satchel down, unwilling to risk being slowed, and when he walks towards Diago, the growl fades to a whine. The alupi lets him pass, sorrow in its eyes, and Vis whispers, "Sorry, I don't have a choice." He makes his way through the ruins into the cavernous hall and demands to take the test, and as before, a condemned guide appears behind him. Alia Veranius, her eyes hollow, her voice flat, and she offers him the control bracer. Vis asks if there's a way to see a demonstration, and Alia activates a miniature overview of the maze at his feet, a clever replication of shifting walls and glowing green light indicators. However, he wants to see how the remnants will react, so Alia enters the real labyrinth, and almost immediately, 3 remnants appear at the end of the model overview. Vis watches as they move with terrifying speed, weaving efficiently through the passages. He tries to block them by shifting the walls, but they recalculate instantly, taking the shortest path toward their prey. Within minutes, they catch Alia's light, and he watches it snuff out. He's shaken, but he repeats this process again and again, 5 times in total, using other condemned guides. Eventually, he realizes the remnants' patterns. They're fast, but they follow set rules, always starting at the far end of the maze, never lying in wait, and always moving towards their target through the most efficient path. They never vary, and it becomes clear this is not a test of strength or intuition, it's a puzzle of logic and timing. He identifies a possible safe route, but he's going to have to be fast. When a final guide appears who's barely a child, it reminds him of his sister, and Vis steels himself and steps forward so that the guide doesn't sacrifice itself. He begins the run, and for the first few minutes, everything goes to plan. He doesn't even see the remnants, he only hears their rattling pursuit echoing through unseen corridors. His confidence begins to build until he turns a corner and finds Belly. Her body is pinned to the wall, mutilated and bloodied, her face frozen in horror. He falters, staring in shock and grief, and he loses count, he loses focus, a crucial delay that could prove fatal. Then, finally, he pulls himself together and continues the run, and around the next corner, one of the remnants barrels towards him, a monstrous, formless storm of obsidian. This slams into a wall using the impact to pivot and barely redirects the walls in time, forming a dead end behind him, sparing his life by inches. This barely manages to fling himself through the arch marking the exit, and as soon as he completes the run, he tears off the bracer and throws it away, trembling. He's made it. He then staggers into the unknown ruins, bathed in sickly red light with no visible source. He notices glowing Vetusian symbols etched into the stone, guiding his trembling steps, and he's still reeling from the horror of seeing Belly's dead body. Somehow, she must have been sent here by Viridius, used and discarded like a pawn. He descends deeper, the air warping around him, heavy and oppressive, and he arrives at a chamber where razor-thin bronze blades rise in a circle, curving inwards like the claws of some mechanical beast. Noticing ancient Vetusian inscriptions, Vis tries his best to translate the archaic meaning.
Herein lies the way to Lucium and Obitium, offered to all those who would contest our extinction. Know that none who accept this task may remain. The burden of togetherness, harmony. I choose the latter. Harmony is reserved for the one who seals the authors of the war from this world. Only he may exceed the hobbled capabilities of this duplication. He and he alone may risk harmony to make the great sacrifice. Vec.
Realizing he's come too far to turn back, Vis steps into the ring of blades, and the response is immediate and brutal. The blades seal around him, lines of red light surge through him like veins of molten blood. I scream as the bronze blades close, and everything burns. The air seems to congeal, crushing him in place before tearing him upwards in every direction. A torment beyond pain, a dismantling of the self. He blacks out, body shattered, and soul blistered. When he awakes, he's inside the ring again, but everything has changed. A cloud of obsidian shards hovers around him, and beyond that, dark silhouettes, armed, humanoid, and silent, stand like sentinels. When he tries to move, fresh cuts appear on his left arm, the blood scrawling the word, wait. The figures chant in Vetusian, complete the journey, warrior. Complete the journey, warrior. Complete the journey, warrior. Over and over again. There's no logic to it. He's come this far, and yet they claim the journey remains unfinished. But when he hesitates, the obsidian cloud erupts into motion, slicing the sentinels apart in a vortex of razors and blood. Then a second word appears on Vis's arm, run. He doesn't hesitate. Vis races back through the halls, donning the bracer again and fleeing the labyrinth in reverse. From this side, the remnants are easy to escape, and he bursts free, climbs to the platform, and finally surfaces in the upper passage. But even here, there's no safety. More figures are waiting, eyeless, lifeless, and blocking the stairs. He's trapped, surrounded by undead. But then, salvation crashes in. Diago, furious, charges down the stairs and tears into the crowd. Dodging bodies, Vis seizes the chance and sprints into the forest, but more of the eyeless husks follow him. Vis and Diago must fight. Watching the wolf fight them off, he realizes the only way to kill them is by breaking their neck. The undead fight with inhuman strength and bite with savage instinct. One attacker buries its teeth deep into Vis's left arm. He continues breaking their necks until the last of them lie dead. Diago limps to his side, bleeding heavily, and Vis cradles the wolf's head in his lap, whispering gratitude, mourning what he knows is the end. Diago pants and whimpers, breath slowing. And as the sky brightens around them, Vis, wounded and delirious, loses consciousness beside the dying creature who saved him. When the sun rises, Vis awakes to Diago still alive, bloodied but breathing. The Alupai limps away into the woods. The bite on Vis's arm pulses with pain and strange numbness, and the carved instructions on his forearm, wait and run, have stopped bleeding. Something or someone helped him escape, but he still doesn't know what it all means. After checking the stolen tracking plate, most medallion stones have reattached and are now fixed in place, even as he rotates the device. Returning east, he reunites with Calidus and Iqua, who are shocked by his battered appearance, and Vis claims his injuries came from an Alupai attack. Iqua treats his wounds and notices that it's badly infected. Calidus quickly deduces that the tracking device isn't localized. The medallion stones reflect a much larger area, likely the entire island. The plate itself is just a receiver. The real tracking network is being will broadcast from a central source. They can tell that Indul's team is the closest to the heart of Yovan and is likely waiting for others to make the first move. Iqua gives him back his medallion, and together they make a plan. Calidus is going to take the medallions and act as a decoy to distract attention away from Iqua and Vis, who will sneak up on Indul. As dusk falls, Vis and Iqua close in on the heart's suspected location, a pair of ancient stone towers perched above a roaring river and encircled by crumbling ruins. Their stolen tracker confirms it. The heart lies in one of the towers. But before they can advance, the tracker shows they're near a recently eliminated student. When they go to investigate, they find a massive grave hidden in the underbrush. Dozens of bodies, Academy safety team members identifiable by green cloaks, and students like Cianis mutilated beyond recognition. Their skulls bashed in and crushed by overwhelming will. The attacks are recent, and someone has replaced the safety teams entirely. They realize this was a purge. The Anguis have infiltrated the Eutychium. They're killing the Sexti and the students and using the medallions to track their prey. The attack on the heart is imminent. They decide to split up, with Vis going to warn Indul, while Iqua uses the tracker to find Amisa's team. But before leaving, Vis removes a severed hand from one of the safety team corpses, wraps it in a green cloak, and takes it with him as proof. Indul is defensive, but Vis shows him the bloodied hand as proof and explains that the Anguis have infiltrated the trial and are going to kill everyone remaining tonight. Indul is shocked but believes him and plans to scatter his fourths, instructing them to float their medallions downriver, tie them to animals, or leave them as decoys. He accepts that he himself is likely going to be a primary target, but he's focused on giving his team the best chance of escape. Vis then warns Indul about his father, Domitius Keeskul. He reveals that at Seuss he overheard a meeting that implied Keeskul was working with the Anguis, and if Keeskul knows Indul is planning to defect to religion, he might not survive the fallout. Indul is stunned and says that Amisa lied. He never told Amisa about his intentions. He then tosses a pouch of stones to Vis and confirms Amisa is the green marker and she's the last one left. He races through the forest, tracking Amisa, only to learn from Iqua and a panicked student named Marcellius that Amisa ditched her tracking stone and made a solo run for the heart of Yovan. Vis prepares to go after her, and Marcellius decides to bail entirely, tossing his medallions and abandoning the mission. Ikwa stays behind to warn Calidus, while Vis, guided by a strange pulsing sensation, this growing sensation of danger, he sneaks into the fortress alone. This new, strange, magical sense allows him to feel the presence of other people, so he's able to avoid the patrols, and he finds the bodies of Amisa's team horrifically executed, crucified against the wall, nailed by jagged stone spikes, and their skulls smashed in like the same style as the earlier kills. Amisa is missing though, which gives him a little bit of hope despite the gruesome display. Now suddenly a voice cuts through the silence. Vis spins around to find himself face to face with the tall, scarred man that he once saw speaking to Relukia at the festival of Platuna. This man speaks cryptically, revealing that the massacre is sanctioned by the military, who want to justify seizing control of the academy. The blame will fall on a scapegoat hierarchy faction. Meanwhile, Viridius will bury the Solivagus Gate to keep its secret safe. Then the man vanishes, warping the air around him, and reappears behind Vis with a knife pressed to his neck. He refers to Vis as kin, revealing that he too has passed through the gate, and he encourages Vis to claim his prize. But when Vis refuses, the man makes an offer. A woman important to Vis is also atop the tower and still alive. If Vis wins, she'll remain unharmed. As the man departs again, he gives Vis an odd warning. Prepare yourself to lose that arm. None of us get out without scars. Vis climbs the tower, feeling the ominous pressure rise, and at the top, he sees a massive hulking man playing with the heart of Jovan like it's a stress toy. Amisa lurks nearby, but before Vis can act, the guard greets him with a chilling smile and says, "Catenicus." His eyes flood to black. And the fight with this massive Anguis-possessed Sextus is a nightmare. The man closes the 20-foot gap in a heartbeat, fists swinging with devastating force. Vis dodges, but barely, and the tower literally quakes from the blow. This is not like fighting the Sextus back when he was an orphan. He's clearly outclassed. This man pulverizes stone with his bare hands and throws it, and a small stray block catches Vis on his already injured arm, spinning him sideways and almost off the edge of the tower. The possessed man prepares to land a killing blow when suddenly he stops, the blackness in his eyes vanishing as he crumples forward, and the heart of Jovan clinks to the stone beside Vis, and Vis sees a shadowy shape detach from the back of the man's skull and vanish behind him. It almost looked like an Alupai spirit. The body tumbles off the edge and strikes the river below. Vis turns to find Amisa standing behind him, holding a short, blood-drenched obsidian blade. Her eyes are black, but quickly fade back to green. She cradles his face, checks his wounds, gently cuts away his ruined tunic to inspect the damage. Using will, she tends to him like someone who still cares deeply. But then something changes. Amisa freezes mid-motion, her eyes fixed on something she sees beneath his tunic. She says it's nothing, but the air goes cold. She steps back, and her eyes flick to black again. Her obsidian dagger remains in her hand, and she asks for the heart of Jovan. Vis laughs weakly at first, thinking that she's joking, but she isn't. "I need to win the Eutychium," she says. "I can't risk us getting separated." Feeling wounded, he says, "You didn't need to threaten me," and tosses the golden triangle at her feet. Then Amisa begins to sob, and when Vis takes a step towards her, the dagger flashes and slams into his stomach. Vis stumbles back, horrified, and falls off the edge. Bleeding, betrayed, and plummeting to his death, he closes his eyes, only for the heart of Jovan to fly into his hand mid-air, pulled by some mysterious force. But from this height, the river might as well be stone, so Vis closes his eyes and lets go. But in the next chapter, he wakes up on a cold riverside, choking up water, but somehow impossibly still alive. His stomach is still bleeding from Amisa's dagger, but the wound is surprisingly shallow, less severe than it should be. Bite marks on his arm reveal that Diago, the Alupai wolf, dragged him from the river and saved his life. Diago is a good boy. He still clutches the heart of Jovan, but the lingering dread from the labyrinth hasn't faded. Strange things have been happening since then. The heart flew into his hand midair, and he seems to be able to sense people's locations without seeing them. Something inside him is off. Still reeling from Amisa's betrayal, he checks the tracking plate and decides to head toward Collidus's location. On arrival, he hears a scream and finds Collidus severely wounded next to the corpse of an Anguis agent with his throat ripped out. Vis rushes to his friend and tries to patch him up despite horrifying injuries and heavy blood loss. Collidus is barely alive, and in broken conversation, he explains that an Anguis attacker tortured him for nearly an hour, blaming him for being left behind. An Alupai, Diago, appeared and killed the man, once again saving the day. Vis carries his friend, refusing to let him die, and Collidus, slipping in and out of lucidity, gives Vis a white medallion, another trial token, and asks him to tell his father why he was in 7, but he doesn't want Belly's name involved. Vis gives him his promise. They push on through the forest, Vis cracking jokes, trying to keep Collidus conscious. At one point, he takes note of the date and realizes it's his 18th birthday. What a way to celebrate. Eventually, Collidus stops responding. His body grows still. Vis doesn't notice the moment that he dies. He just keeps on walking, carrying the weight of his fallen friend through sheer will. When the academy finally comes into view, Vis snarls at the guards who try to help. He pushes past them, staggers into the courtyard mid-Viridius speech, and drops Collidus's body at the temple steps. In a whisper that only Viridius and Amisa can hear, he promises, "I'm going to make sure you burn for this." Then he places the heart on the statue, completing the Eutychium, and collapses. In the infirmary, he drifts in and out of consciousness, plagued by dreams and memories, faces of the fallen, Belly and Collidus cracking jokes, Amisa beautiful but bloodstained. Eventually, he sees a vision of his father sitting beside him. Though Vis knows that it can't be real, the moment is intimate and heartbreaking. His father embraces him and comforts him and urges him to keep fighting.
I never wanted this for you, but I am proud, Diago. Proud of the decisions you have made, of the strength you have shown, of the man you have become. Proud beyond measure. I know it will be painful, but you cannot give up now. Remember who you are. You have to fight. You mourn your friend, but death is a doorway, son. You will see him again. No one is ever truly lost. I am so glad I got to see you again, even if it is too short, even if it ends up being the last time. I love you, Diago. I love you, son. Never forget that. He turns as if ripping himself away, starts walking from my vision. Don't go. I know he's not real, but I can't help myself, pleading, my voice weak and breaking. Please, Father, don't leave me. He doesn't stop. Courage. I hear him whisper as he vanishes into the darkness of the dream.
When Vis finally awakes, Viridius is at his bedside and informs him that his left arm has been amputated due to an unstoppable rot, and his blood has been tainted, something that must remain secret or it can become fatal. Vis is now restrained, not as a prisoner, but for his own safety. Viridius asks him to confirm if he ran the secret labyrinth and if the writing on his arm helped him escape. Vis answers yes to both, and he also tells the Principalis that Belly is dead. Now, when Vis explains that Amisa stabbed him, Viridius actually defends her and says that she did it because she thought he was dying, because she thought it was already too late to save him, because of whatever it tainted his blood. We don't really know what's going on, but Vis doesn't want to hear it, and he doesn't want to see her. Now, time is running short, and Viridius urges him to request a position under religion, saying that it will help avoid a future cataclysm. He promises to explain more later, and then Aiden shows up, and Vis just ends up breaking down, feeling that the death of Calidus was meaningless. Calidus didn't even want to be there. But then Aiden gently tells him, "Death is only meaningless if it does not change us, Vis." Then a group of senators arrive, congratulating him, officially now Domitor Vis Telemus, and they request his graduation assignment. Which faction is he going to choose? They say if he doesn't choose, the censor will assign him to military. Now, Vis considers his old plan of fleeing into obscurity, but he realizes that he can't run anymore from a fight that he might actually be able to affect. He wants to stay and make a difference, but he doesn't want to accept what Viridius told him to, and he also doesn't want to join military like Ulquiskor wants him to, so he chooses the censor. If he's going to uncover the truth and stop more deaths, the censor's office, through which all information flows, is where he needs to be. After the senators leave, Vis is angry at Viridius and tells him that he will be willing to listen to what he has to say later, but he refuses to work with him for now. Alone, Vis is struggling with the ghost feelings of his missing arm, and on his bedside table, he sees a small wooden ship. It seems strangely familiar, and when he finds a hidden way to open it, inside there's a name etched: Diago. His father's name and his own legacy. And now we're moving on to the epilogue, which is a massive twist that's kind of hard to wrap your head around, but I'll explain it. And finally, we have the epilogue, Synchronism ex uno pluris. This is a Latin phrase meaning from one, many. This stands in contrast to the motto on the Great Seal of the United States, meaning out of many, one, which reflects the formation of a single nation from individual states. Ex uno pluris is the inverse, representing the process of fragmentation or the emergence of diversity from a singular entity, which you're about to realize perfectly captures this epilogue. Captures in words, you might say. I'll see myself out. Vis awakes in the crimson-lit labyrinth chamber once again. Bronze blades encircle him, humming with ominous energy, and a new word is carved onto his arm by unseen force. Wait. Then, letter by letter, R-U. He doesn't wait to find out the rest, he runs. Deeper in the labyrinth, a cryptic message is etched into the wall. Sealed against the tools of the enemy after the rending, the passage to Ludikium requires a toll to ensure validity. Two etched symbols below bear the hierarchy's symbol. Vis places his hands in the circles, and the world erupts in blinding white and searing pain. He awakens somewhere else. A rotunda of pristine white stone, snow-capped peaks surrounding him. His left arm is gone, vanished entirely, and three strangers approach. One kneels and calls him Traveler, telling him, "The other from your world will be coming." The world flickers, and Vis awakes again, back in the labyrinth, unsure of how much time has passed. Another man is there, dark-haired, scarred, and serious, and he introduces himself as Siror, Ulquiskor's brother. He wastes no time explaining they have 2 minutes to save Vis back in res. He explains what just happened. Vis has been copied the same way the world was once copied during a war against something called the Concurrence. So basically, let me break this down for you. The chamber acted as a cloning device, splitting Vis across dimensions. There's now 3 versions of him, one in Res, his original world, one in Lucium, and one here in Obatium. That's right, while Siror might have died in Res, he is alive here in Obatium. Now, Vis is somehow connected to his real body, still in Res, but not for long. If the Vis in Res dies, the rest of him goes with it. The price for crossing worlds apparently is an arm. That's a pretty hefty toll when you only got 2 of them, and I don't think you can get health insurance for that. Now, Siror presses a blade into Vis's hand and says they need to send a signal back to Res to ensure his survival. There's no time for questions. Vis rolls up his sleeve to carve a message. Now we know that the words being carved into his arm were from him, from a version of him that was cloned in another world. What a mind-bending ending. I cannot wait to start Strength of the Few. Now, since you made it to the end of the video, you get to join my super secret giveaway. I'm going to be giving away this hardcover copy of The Strength of the Few in probably like a week or 2. I'll choose the winner. I'll leave a link in the description to join the giveaway, so make sure to click on that if you want a chance to win a free hardcover copy of The Strength of the Few. And there we have my in-depth summary for The Will of the Many. What a crazy ending in this book. Let me know if you want to see a summary for The Strength of the Few. I'm probably gonna wait a little while for that book to kind of settle. Hopefully the series will get more fan art. It was difficult editing this video when there's just not much fan art to go off of. But let me know if you want to see summaries for any other series. I really want to summarize Sun Eater as well as First Law. So those 2 series are probably ones I'm going to summarize next, but first I need to finish my summary for The Wise Man's Fear. If you enjoyed this summary and you want to help out the channel and help me be able to make more of these summaries, then make sure to check out my Patreon or become a channel member, or just leave a little donation on Ko-fi. Even the smallest amount helps out so much. And with that, I want to give a massive thank you to all of my patrons and my channel members and everybody that's helped out the channel. I want to give a special thank you to my top supporters on Patreon, Mike Baker and Josh from Red Fury Books. You guys are amazing and your support helps out so much.